To our 5:30 meeting, and Commissioner Whitley, welcome. Glad to have you join us from afar. We weren't expecting to see you, but it looks like you're at least in spirit in your Hawaiian shirt, so that's a good thing.
Aloha.
Well, the purpose of our time tonight, while all you work through your food, is we wanted to bring the board together and spend some time revisiting the potential bond projects that staff has been working on based on the direction and the feedback that we received from you all at our planning conference at the end of February. So this is really just meant to kind of walk through sort of where we think we are based on what we know today, and to get feedback from you to make sure that we are heading in the right direction that the board wants to see us continue to head in as we continue to pursue general obligation bonds. And I'm going to minimize here. So based on the feedback that we received at the planning conference, a total of $30 million seemed to start to be coalescing as the right price point, if you will, on being able to move the needle on some of the big projects that were important to the board without maybe overextending what we were asking for. And how those seem to be coming together is a transportation bond that would include projects that total approximately $20 million. That would be the maximum bond issuance for transportation qualifying projects. And then a up to $10 million parks and recreation facilities bond for projects that fall within that area. So staff has been working really, really hard, and I just want to take a moment to thank them. This has been a lot of information to pull together in a very, very short period of time to keep the conversation moving and to keep us on target with where we will need to be in order to make this happen in November if the board ultimately decides that they want to go down that path. So this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about this evening, and we'll certainly get into more detail as we go along. So some of the numbers have shifted a little bit. Some of the project scopes have shifted a little bit since we met with you in February. And so we definitely want to have an opportunity to go through all of those details today. But from what we heard from you all, what we are looking at trying to fund in a transportation bond at this point in time would be what we're calling downtown projects. Do you have a question? You good? Okay. What we're calling downtown projects, which would be a combination of streetscape improvements, mobility and parking improvements in our downtown core, the completion of Greylock Ridge Road extension, the segments C and D, completing the sidewalk gaps throughout town, the East Charles Street Crestdale Road Railroad crossing improvements, and then a slug of money towards the betterment cost share for a portion of the John Street widening project between Greylock Ridge and I-485. For the Parks and Recreation Facilities bond, we are looking at the build out of Purser-Halsey Park, the completion of funding for the Matthews Downtown Loop multi-use path, some park improvements that we heard some interest in including in this number. And then this is going to be a slight adjustment that we'll talk about. Instead of identifying a particular greenway project, Corey has had some conversations with Mecklenburg County, and we have looked further at some of the right-of-way that we need to acquire in order to move any of our additional greenway projects forward. And so at this point, we're not identifying a specific greenway project so much as just understanding that the funds will move the needle forward on completing additional greenway projects throughout town. Okay, we're having a technical moment, so just a second. We'll see if we can't get this straightened out.
While we're waiting, Becky, on the sidewalk gaps, have the homeowners been approached if it's going to be on their property, the fact that they may be additional taxation, et cetera, et cetera?
So there wouldn't be any additional, are you talking about taxation on that individual property owner?
In other words, if the sidewalk goes through their property, isn't it customary that their tax burden increases with the sidewalk? No, it's not?
Nope.
Oh, wonderful.
Susan, do you want to talk to that at all? So typically we just acquire right of way and then construct it, but I'll let you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first project that we want to talk to you about falls under the transportation bond. And this is the big one within this proposed bond package. So in taking feedback from the board, there seemed to be a lot of interest in providing a significant amount of investment in our downtown area to make some of the streetscape improvements and certainly improve mobility and also increase parking to the fullest extent possible. So in meeting with staff, we talked through this, and the some of the original project scope limits in what came to you in February had a smaller scale to this project. But you know, staff had some great feedback in thinking about what makes this an enticing package. You know, what are we hearing from citizens that they're interested in having in downtown? And obviously parking is a big one. And there's lots of debates about a walking problem versus a parking problem. But at the end of the day, folks are looking for additional spaces. And in looking at the project limits, what Susan has done here is she has stretched the scope of the streetscape improvements that would now begin at McDowell Street, and they would go all along Trade Street and then terminate at East Matthew Street. And so that would be a nice bookended streetscape improvement project along that entire corridor. That would be the widened sidewalks. There would be some changes to parking, the bump outs and the benches and the brick pavers, and really the aesthetic from start to finish that we are looking to achieve within that core corridor downtown. And then there would be a number of additional projects because there would be some losses to parking in the specific design that staff is recommending. And so it was important to us that the net increase for the entire project still had a tangible benefit to the downtown community, so that anything that might be lost along Trade Street is more than made up in the additional improvements that are being made throughout the corridor. And so Jay gets the credit. He's not with us this evening, but Jay gets the credit in looking at how can we identify at least 100 new spaces. So even as we're losing some, that we're gaining at least 100 throughout the core. That felt like a good number that folks could hang their hat on and feel good about. And so in addition to the Trade Street streetscape improvements, you do have the completion of the parking lot that is the Heritage Lane parking lot. I think we've called it a lot of different things, but that's the parking lot behind White Duck Taco Shop. We would be proposing a true build out of that parking lot as a part of this project. And then the one-way pair on Library Lane and North Fremont Street, you would pick up additional parking spaces there, completion of sidewalks. There would be additional parking added along West Charles Street, along West Matthew Street, and the North Fremont Street on the other side of the tracks, essentially near the Windstream facility behind Seaboard. So all totaled, this would net approximately 102 new spaces as designed. The exact configuration of the downtown streetscape and the exact configuration of parking, that would still come back to this board before, final renderings were committed to. So that is certainly something that can be looked at and adjusted, that you may end up actually getting more spaces out of this if you made some different choices in that area. But this is what's being recommended for the downtown project at this point in time. The rough estimates right now are just over half of your bond package. This would actually cost just north of $10 million to make all of these improvements. But we felt like it may be difficult to talk to the community about the changes along Trade Street that if they were not seeing significant additional parking increases to offset any of those adjustments. So happy to have feedback, answer questions, and our resident experts are in the room that I will likely be deferring to on any questions that you might have.
I do have a question about the Heritage Lane parking lot. I think it was, at least it was my hope, and I think a couple other people on the board mentioned making that lot maybe not a permanent lot where we pave it over, but make it more pervious. And I don't know, Susan, can you talk to that? I mean, I'm not convinced that that lot, that location's best use is a parking lot. So for me, I would like to have it be kind of temporary and not spend a lot of money on a fancy parking lot that we may build something on later.
That's an excellent point. Something to consider. So I think additional parking options have like the cheap option. So what we have in these costs are a shiny new parking lot that has sidewalks and curbs and drainage and looks great and looks like a public parking lot that you can park in and push your stroller on. The pervious one is kind of, that's the affordable fix. That's the one that has the geocells and backfill and it's more pervious. And that would be a more temporary looking thing. It wouldn't, if you put it, we kind of felt like if we put it in a bond package, we wanted to look like a shiny thing. We wanted to look new, and this is what the investment is. But it's definitely the decision of the board if we wanted to spend, do I have on that one, 482 or the 180 or whatever on the GSL option.
Speaking, I think that I'd like to have more discussion on that with the board.
I agree with that. But for everybody's edification tonight, and we talked about this just to get it on the record, you're trying to set a plateau of around $20 million. These seem to be the higher selected quartile projects, but ultimately we can swap out, substitute, and adjust accordingly because the bond referendum doesn't get to this level of detail. So your ask is more like, do you have the stomach for the 20 million? But again, you don't have to spend the 20 million. You may come back and say, streetscape mobility improvements, Trade Street, that's all we can deal with because it's $0.015. It's the same with the parks. So really what you're trying to get tonight is sort of like the feeling as a whole board, and 20 million seem like a reasonable target range. Are these projects in that range? Realizing we still have debate about various things and go from there. So, but when do we have to finally kind of stop designing and commit to pull the trigger?
So to answer your question, you are exactly right. So the main purpose of tonight is to certainly get feedback, and if there are, say a clear consensus that you never want that parking lot to be designed or scoped to be kind of the full-fledged shiny penny, as Susan called it, then we would reduce that. But what we are looking to try to do is get enough direction and feedback from the board to be able to pursue cost estimates, because we are working with in-house cost estimating experts in trying to ballpark to see, do these things even fit within $20 million? And right now we think that they do, but before we go out and talk to the community about X, Y, and Z projects, or put together renderings or say commit to the 20 million as an example for the transportation bonds, we want to make sure that we're pretty close as far as, yes, we would be able to fund these projects if we moved forward with this bond package, or maybe it's only going to be project A and project B, and the other ones, if there's money left over, that's great, we'll do them. But we're just not sure that they're going to completely fit. So as far as being able to make commitments, Scott Leo, who is on the agenda tonight, provided me with a draft calendar about an hour ago that I glanced at. So I can pull that up while the board is continuing its discussion. But I believe that he was looking at some sort of commitment to a dollar amount and then a rough commitment to projects, only to make sure that they fit within the correct bond categories, not because the board is in any way committed to actually completing those. Be looking for some kind of commitment around the end of April into early May to keep on our bond schedule.
So as a follow-up, let's say, and we did this before with the other bonds 10 years ago. Let's say we pull the trigger and we get approved for $20 million, but the board says they only want to act on 10 million. Are there financial repercussions of some financial charges that were put out there, financing fees, anything like that for the amount you don't use?
So it just expires.
Okay.
It just
like the last one.
expires.
Okay.
Mhm.
I can already predict that my phone is going to start buzzing with texts and emails asking about a parking deck and why a parking deck isn't included. Do we have any round figures on CJ or Susan, what a parking deck would cost or what it costs per space? I know it's outrageously expensive, but a lot of our citizens have been asking for a parking deck ever since I've been an elected official. So
We have the numbers that were so anything that we did after the back, off the top of my head, is, it was around like 8 million or something in that lot. So we had a parking study done. We had a parking consultant ask the point blank, is this spot, to me, a parking deck, is the spot of location? The spot is really difficult to protect and if you're looking at a larger lot, and it's according to our numbers, and our study that was showing you it's not needed. It's a huge investment for very little return when we have all this stuff. Staff is not recommending. We would rather do all these upfits for less money than to find small or deck. We have or retail and more other stuff. So it's
I just think that point should be made when we sell we're educating the public about
We
it. Inform them because a lot of folks have asked for that. Any other questions? Mr. Urban?
But to follow up on that, the time you initiate the bond, you start moving through these projects, the town could end up being in a public-private relationship on that lot for a tabletop deck. And a developer says, I'm going to stick 3 floors on top of it. I pick up 1 floor for my uses. The town keeps 2 floors and you're charging or something like that. So, I mean, I think the beauty of this discussion is, and that's why I kind of like the temporary nature of the lot, because it's in a really prime location and it's got some reasonable dimensional attributes to it to have a tabletop sitting there from that standpoint. And the inclination, we've talked about this for 19 years now, is when is a deck affordable in the town of Matthews? Well, decks are now being talked about at the Sportsplex. So you're right there at that verge. And so in 3 to 5 years, that conversation could be a deck in downtown.
Any other feedback before we move on?
Can I ask a question? Does silence mean we're okay? Because these are big decisions, right? And we don't want to make a bad assumption from a staff perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the point that Commissioner Urban made, that we're not necessarily absolutely locked into these, gives us some ease in saying, yeah, 20 million is a good number. We don't necessarily have to do, check every box. So
Yeah,
If we were locking this down, absolutely, you can bet there'd be a whole lot more
Sure,
debate on it.
sure.
But,
And-
we're like, yeah, we have professionals that are making good recommendations, and I think we generally are in agreement, right? Anybody disagree? No?
I don't disagree, but I would, I mean, for me, silence just means I'm ready to learn more. It doesn't mean like, it means this sounds good, but let's continue learning.
sure, sure.
Thank you. Mr. Hoover?
Same here. I'm just listening and learning, and I'm really concerned about if we really should be even discussing this right now. We're at a 40-year with inflation high, it's just really a lot right now. Looking down the road, what's coming. I mean, go to grocery store, we're asking a lot. Taxes going up. I mean, from when I was reading, and it's for me right now, it's just questionable. I'm just thinking.
It's another tool in our tool belt. We don't have to pull the trigger, but we would have that ability if we passed. So, I mean, I think if prices were through the roof, I think staff would probably tell us, hey, why don't we wait till things calm down a little bit? But prices rarely go down, right?
I think it's only going to get worse here. I mean, from what we're hearing, and when you've got gas $4 and up a gallon, I mean, and then go to grocery store, buy a little pound of sausage and it's $6. I'm like, whoa. And, so it's just right now for me, I'm even questioning if we should even be discussing this right now, even though I know the voters will vote on it, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Mr. Urban?
Becky, for Gina's edification, talk about the time frame of this, because I think you're thinking about today and the next year or two, but in the world of bonds, this is a several year rotation. And should you wait 4 or 5 years and start the process, you get another 4 or 5 years in which to enact upon. So could you talk about maybe the timing of this?
Sure. Yeah. To touch on that a little bit. So, what we're looking for tonight is just enough of a head nod that these are the projects that if we were to pursue bonds on a ballot, and if that were to be approved by the voters, and then if the board wanted to execute on those bonds down the road, that these would be the projects that at this point in time, the board thinks they're interested in pursuing for the community. And so we're looking for that at this point in time to just know how much are we asking on the ballot, and to make sure that the projects fit within the correct categories that we're asking about. And then we want to firm up some of these numbers with some cost estimates. And then because it is a volatile market, get some better guidance on how to account for cost escalations. So, if the price is $10 million today, and it's a 10% inflation annually, then if we're not expecting to build it for 3 years, then we've got to make sure that there's enough capacity in these dollar amounts that we're still able to deliver on them for the community. And we don't end up in the unfortunate position of we got the permission, but then we still can't afford to do the project because it just got ahead of us with how expensive it got. So, if this is on the ballot in November of 22 and the voters do approve it, we automatically have up to 7 years for the board to decide whether or not to even execute the bonds. So if they, if the board wants to proceed full force and approve them right away, that's perfectly within your right. If you want to pause and have other things settle down or see if they settle down, certainly able to do that. And then we've got that cost escalator to hopefully help keep us on track of, just how long, should we wait before we would understand that we might need some alternative funding to still make it happen. So if you get to the end of that 7 years and you still have not executed the bond, you can ask for up to a 3-year extension. And the town has successfully done that before. So you have potentially up to 10 years to actually execute on having the bond issued to receive the proceeds to then be able to have the money to complete the project. We are certainly not committing to it tonight. And even if the board committed to putting it on the ballot, it still would not in any way, shape, or form commit the board to pursuing the project. All of those decisions come later.
So if I'm understanding correctly, from the planning conference, where we were saying if it was a 20 million, the average house around 500K, their tax increase would be $110 a year.
Yeah, that with landing on the $30 million, if, let me just get to the right.
30, the 32 with 500K would be around 174 a year. It was like 4 or something. I'm just kind of rounding up.
Yep, I can pull that up. So.
And then I noticed that we, yeah.
So this has been updated based on a $30 million bond issuance. If both the transportation bond and the Parks and Recreation Facility bond were pursued and then approved and then issued, it would be an anticipated maximum impact of up to 3.2 cents on the tax rate to cover that debt service. But that would be if you issued all of them at once. So as an example, if the voters said yes, and the board said, we just want to pursue the downtown project, you would only issue the $10 million in debt. That would be the only payment that we would be making. And so it could be 5 years before any of the other bonds were issued, and then the tax rate would be impacted only at that time.
Yeah, because that bottom sentence right down there, assess home values are expected to increase an average of 20%. That's concerning me too.
Yep.
So you got, when you add everything up, that's going to come and hit everyone. That's going to be a lot. I mean, it affects you in so many ways.
Sure. Yes, fully agree with that.
Commissioner Tufano?
Yes, I just want to make a statement. I mean, we're at a historically sweet spot here where bond rates are starting to rise, yet inflation is also going to rise dramatically. Federal Reserve announced they're going to make 7 rate hikes this year, minimum of 1/4 point each. So we have a situation where we have the ability to have bonds purchased at a relatively low rate, but at the same time be ahead of the inflation curve by acting sooner than later. So not that it matters in terms of this conversation, but it just is a point that needs to be made, that we're in a very unique situation in time right now in terms of where the interest rate is with relation to inflation. We are at actually a negative interest rate at this time with respect to inflation. That probably won't last very long, but if we're going to be pulling the trigger and doing any capital improvements within this year would be the best time to do it. So thank you.
Commissioner Whitley, did you have a comment or a question? I apologize, I can't see you from my screen.
No, I did, but you answered the question that I was anticipating. I was anticipating we are looking for a $30 million bond. Is that correct?
That is correct. 20 million for transportation and up to 10 million for Parks and Recreation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Whitley, we can't see you, so if you have a question, just break in at any time. All right.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm gonna keep rolling if everyone is okay with that.
All roll.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I want to add a little bit to that conversation about, obviously we also have concerns about our tax rate going up, and an extra $100 a year, 120 means a lot to our family. I think the beauty of these 2 bonds is that these are both realms where they increase the affordability of living in Matthews. So the return on multi-mobility, the return on parks programming parks with better features and amenities makes it more affordable for my family to get around, to go to the park, to take advantage of everything that Matthews has to offer. So it doesn't make me cringe quite as much as it could if it felt more frivolous. But I do think, when you're filling in sidewalk gaps, that not only means a lot for my family, it means a lot for many of the families in Matthews who don't have those amenities yet. It could really fill in some gaps for services that we provide.
One more question, and Gina brought it up, the 20% increase in valuation that was not included in the yearly tax rates that were in the table?
No, the tax rates in the table simply showed the increase if all bonds ended up being issued.
At current valuation?
At the 30, no, it did incorporate the new valuation.
It did?
It did.
Okay, thank you.
Becky, you made this point, but I want to reiterate that, I think it was $159 for a $497,000 house or whatever. That's if we issued all of the bonds at one time, which is highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. I
Highly
think staff
unlikely.
would have a conniption if we were trying,
So
trying to do all
that's
of
kind
this
of
work
a
at once.
worst case scenario. So I think everybody should realize that that's if we said, okay, let's do everything all at once, which would be terrible. I don't think we would ever want to do that, just from a logistical standpoint.
Yes. Okay. So the second project that we wanted to talk about tonight is Greylock Bridge Extension. This is segments C and D that extend from Tanktown Road over to future Independence Point Parkway. As you'll recall, the other segments from John Street over to Tanktown Road, including now crossing the railroad track, have been funded through bonus allocation dollars, which was phenomenal for us to have that funding to put towards that segment of the road. So this would essentially complete the road. As you will recall, there is a significant opportunity that we may be able to secure a different funding pathway for this road through the tax increment grant process. Those conversations continue with that developer. And so this is an example of a project that we feel like there's multiple paths to yes. So one could certainly be the bonds. If the board decided to issue them for this purpose, if the TIG did not work out, then you would have this funding available to make the road happen. But if the TIG is successfully negotiated and the county agrees to it, this is an example of a project that by finding that other funding source, you would then have these dollars available in the bond that you could let them expire. And to some of the other comments, that would lessen the tax burden that you would be looking at, or you could take these dollars and so long as it was for a transportation qualifying project, you could put them towards something else. So that could be covering increased costs on one of these other projects. It could be doing more sidewalks, or it could be something completely different so long as it fell within the requirements of a transportation related project.
Mayor Pro Tem.
It's not directly related to this project, but John, you were letting me know at the CARTPO meeting last week that it looks like that some of these parallel roads for the Independence aren't going to be funded by DOT. Has there been any thought given to putting some of the bond funding towards those? I mean, I'm like, the future Independence Point Parkway, stuff like that. It's a little concerning if that doesn't get built. We're building a road that's going to stop nowhere.
Well, a couple things. DOT said that they would not allow that. They've removed them from project U-2509, which is Independence Boulevard. They were previously approved. And they've also removed them for consideration from the statewide mobility bucket of funds, which is, very disconcerting. However, Tony Lathrop, one of the representatives on the NCDOT board, said that it's his intention to try to get them funded somehow, some way. I believe it when I see it. But the thing you should know is one of those roads, and I don't know which is which, Commissioner Garner, you may know, but one of them costs like $59 million. And the other one's like 120, or is that mine the right ballpark, something like that. So they're together probably close to $200 million. So this would even come close to being able to fund either one of them.
Then that kind of makes it a moot point, does it not?
It,
And
I can, and certainly Susan, but that portion of Independence Point Parkway is potentially part of that same rezoning that is going to come before this board in a couple of months. So the idea is that though it looks like a road to nowhere today, as part of that rezoning, as the sports, as the ENT district is built out, that the construction of that road would be completed by the developer because they're going to need it in order to access the back portions that are currently undeveloped within those parcels.
Yeah, I look at this as incremental connectivity. I mean, we're building it a little piece at a time and hoping and praying for the future that things will come to fruition. But good question. Commissioner Urban?
So there was a famous guy that said, take a half step backwards. I'm going to sidestep. Let's talk about the TIG for a second. I had a meeting with petitioner in the ENT. We broached the issue of the TIG along with Wyatt at the Briley, and they said, peak interest. The eyebrows raised up and the whole night. Okay, well, this is a good conversation kind of thing. How is that going to be an all-consuming conversation that we can't be talking bonds and TIGs at the same time? Or are they two really divergent conversations? I don't want to lose the cat. I got him by the tail right now on the TIG conversation. So how does that play into this dialogue right now? Is this something like, no, based on what we're at, we need to focus on the bonds, deal with the bond, pivot in November and talk about the TIG? Or can we sort of start boiling the water a little bit quicker with the TIG conversation?
The TIG conversation needs to boil. So in the conversations that we've had with the county, that needs to be hammered out before that rezoning comes to the board, because the argument is that that we would need to be able to successfully make is that if it weren't for that development, or if it weren't for this road, the development wouldn't happen. And so if the board were to take action on the rezoning without the TIG being settled, there's no leverage, because the developer is basically already saying, I'm willing to build. So no, that the two need to happen simultaneously. And so that has been the request to staff, is to continue those conversations and then also see if that other developer is interested, and does it make sense to bring them into the conversation or not?
Based on that, that's probably, we're probably maxed out. We're using every expendable staff resource, et cetera, et cetera. So don't pitch you with like, we want to build an airport or a golf course or anything like that right now. Just stick to TIGs and bonds.
No airports or golf courses,
Okay.
but I think TIGs and bonds are
TIGs
good.
and bonds for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And Becky, would you explain TIG? I want to make sure, because some of that's maybe everybody understands it, but
Yeah. So real briefly, the tax increment grant would work in such a way that the developer would be responsible for building the facility. So the developer bears the costs, they bear the risks, and then we utilize a portion of the increased tax revenue that is generated from the development that they then put in to essentially reimburse them for a portion or all of the expenses that they incurred to build that public facility, in this case, roads. And so the beauty of it is that the developer bears all the risk. So they have to build the facility, and then if their development doesn't happen, then, or if it doesn't materialize to the valuation that they thought it would, then that is ultimately up to them to deal with. And the public facility is the public facility. So it is reimbursing some of the tax revenue back. So that is certainly a conversation and a thought that we would go through with the board to make sure that that was something that you wanted to do. But it can be a very effective way to acquire public facilities and public improvements. And often the private sector can build them cheaper than the public sector can. So there's some other cost efficiencies that you sometimes get through it in that way as well. Any other thoughts about Greylock Ridge before we move on? Okay. Sidewalk gaps. Susan, if you want to come forward. So we spent a lot of time. Susan and Dana have put a ton of work into looking at sidewalk gaps and sidewalk projects throughout town. And so, Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you to just talk through your thought process and kind of what projects ended up at the top.
Shoulder. Thank you. I thought I was shouting. Now I can stop shouting. The next, another criteria is residential density, with the thought being apartments have more people that would need roads and or sidewalks. And so that would have a higher priority than maybe a single family residential density. Another one would be proximity to a bus stop. Walking through grass to stand at the bus stop is a very unpleasant situation. I highly recommend you try it. I have. It's unpleasant. So we really want to give people a hard surface to walk on and stand on while they use transit. There's one more criteria that I'm missing, and it is distance to a destination. The single most beneficial way to relieve congestion is to get people out of cars, especially single occupancy vehicle cars. And the way to do that is to give them attractive alternate modes: walking, biking, transit, micromobility. So we wanted to, as there's a destination nearby, the sidewalk gap near that destination would get a higher priority. We liked the idea of spreading them around the town, these gaps, because we believe all areas of town are equal and gaps are gaps. And so that's our criteria. A total criteria is based on what you saw on that spreadsheet. Once we sorted by the length of the gap, the total criteria based on those selection criteria, then lastly was cost, right? Cost is always important. Let's get those easy ones knocked out of the way first. So the first 3.1 here are all your smaller gaps, and then they are sorted according to functional classification of the road, and then by the cost. The next grouping, there's a lot. If you want to give us $27 million for sidewalk gaps, we will happily take it. But then this next group is kind of everything else on that map. And again, this will be an ever evolving list. But if we end up with some cost savings in that first group, or maybe as Commissioner Tofano talked about right of way, maybe there's one of those where we don't have an easy acquisition for right of way or easements. Maybe we don't do that one. And then maybe we can start tackling this next list, which is sorted by that functional classification first. So you see NC 51 Monroe Road are at the top. Now that NC 51 project is between John Street and Sam Newell, that's a pretty big dollar because of the bridge over CSX. So we may or may not tackle that one first. Maybe we try and get a grant for that one. But as Commissioner Urban said, this is just kind of a, hey, does this seem right to you? Is this a priority for us? We can deep dive into all of these in the future. And obviously, if we do end up with bonds, you would see all this in more detail. So this is the next grouping of those larger gaps. And you can see their size, approximate cost, and then that running total there at the bottom. Oh, I said 27. I meant to say 34 million. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything from my notes here. These costs all also include design and right of way. Now, as I said, we try and get everything within the right of way, first of all. Second of all, we ask for easements if easements are needed. And then thirdly, maybe we have a right of way agent help negotiate it. So we're estimating conservatively, there could be some cost savings if adjacent owners decide to donate, but we would like to get kind of a package together and a design firm to tackle all of these. There's what's 14 in that first grouping. That's a lot of work for our staff to do that we're already maxed out without all these projects. So that's why we have design also included in here. I'm happy to answer any questions about how we prioritized or what these costs may or may not include.
I have a comment and then a question. First of all, I think your prioritization criteria are really good because
Thank you.
obviously we can only attack a small percentage of the $34 million that we need. So it's important that we do the right ones. I recall more than once, probably 4 or 5 times since I've been an elected official, where people have come here into this room, homeowners, and said they didn't want sidewalks. Commissioner Urban, I'm sure you remember a couple of those, like if people were one of them was in a cul-de-sac and had very ornately and expensively landscaped yards, and they didn't want to cut a path through the middle of their, Chinese maples and all that stuff. So our board at that time allowed them not to have sidewalks or allowed the builder not to put sidewalks in. I guess my question is, more pointedly, is we're not going to force anybody that, if there's a residential area where some homeowners really don't want a sidewalk, we're not going to make them put sidewalks in, correct?
Tough to say right now. That would definitely be a case by case basis. So some of these ones at the bottom of the list are in neighborhoods and across, one or, several properties. If we get one property owner holding out, I think I would defer to you all to say, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue moving forward, or do we skip this one and move on? I'm not in the business of pressuring people to put infrastructure in their yard. And we just hope that everyone understands the community benefit that sidewalks provide in getting people out of the street.
Yeah, the cases I'm talking about were where there were several adjacent homeowners that said, none of us want a sidewalk here, so please don't put one. And we granted exceptions for those folks. Any other questions for Susan? Comments? I think we're good. Larry, you good? He's getting another Mai Tai.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, the next project is the East Charles Street and Crestdale Railroad intersection improvements. So this is, of course, at the intersection of Crestdale and East Charles. That would be raising the roadway in order to better align with the railroad crossing, include sidewalk, curb gutter, planing strip. It is also on your board agenda for tonight, an exception to the RFP process, but staff is currently pursuing a flood study because that will help inform then the more formal cost estimate on this project to make sure that the culvert and essentially the drainage work that would be included within the scope of this project is going to appropriately address any concerns in that area. So the total for this one right now, based on what we know today, is estimated at just shy of $2 million.
I have a question that maybe it's either for CJ or perhaps Chief Pennington, but I think this needs to be done. There's obviously a safety concern at this intersection, and it's been a long time coming, but is there any unintended consequence if we make this really easy for tractor trailers to run up and down through there? Are we going to greatly increase tractor trailer traffic on that road? Does anybody know, Susan?
I am neither CJ nor Chief P, but I do have an opinion about that.
Okay, fine.
Shockingly,
I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm sorry.
I've mentioned this to you all before. So the NCDOT criteria for a humped crossing is 3 inches. It's very, very small. Because the house right there at the intersection sits closer to the road than most of the neighbors, there's only but so much we can raise this intersection before we get what I would consider too close to her house. So we are not raising it all the way up to the level. We might get 14 inches out of it. It'll be enough to keep tractor trailers from getting stuck, but it's still going to be uncomfortable for them. But the goal is to create enough height where the hinge doesn't stick on the tracks anymore. But I think we were talking at one point about getting up with trucking company routing systems to get them routed around. And that's still a goal of staff, would be to continue to try and get trucking companies to route off of this section.
That would be ideal. Do both, fix it, and then also encourage them not to go there anyway, because
Agreed.
I don't think we want a lot of truck traffic on that road, which is mostly residential, except at the end there.
Agreed.
Mayor, also GPS sends them that way. And that's been the problem so far for a lot of those truckers. GPS bring them that way.
And I have no idea how we fix that. I don't know if anybody does. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an important project, long time coming. I know we've been talking about it forever, so this would be good to get this one done.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll keep moving. Sorry, my slides are not cooperating.
By the way, CJ, I directed that question to you because I wondered if there was any concern with trucks putting extra wear and tear on the road. Was why I was directing that towards you.
All right, the next project is $500,000 towards the betterment cost share for the East John Street widening project U4714. This is just section AB, which is between Graylock Ridge Road and the outer limits of I-485 ramps. So this would include a 10-foot side path and planting strips. So of course, DOT provides the vast majority of the cost of this project, but just anything that is over and above their standard, we are responsible for paying for that portion of it. And so this is a rough estimate. I know staff has asked repeatedly for better numbers from DOT. We continue to not get them, but staff did feel comfortable that this number would set us hopefully well on our way toward covering any of the costs that we would be responsible with for this project.
I don't know why I seem to be asking all the questions tonight, so if somebody else please jump in. But would this affect the area where people park to get on the Greenway? It would, Susan.
Yeah, so the area that Mayor is talking about in the photo on the right, it's kind of at your back on the right, where there's kind of extra wide pavement where people park to get on the Greenway. The proposal is to remove that. That becomes a 3-lane. So it'd be 2-3 lanes heading towards 485. And so it'll be on us to better inform people about the existing parking on Council Place that is underutilized, but there is a sign on Council Place that says Greenway parking. And rarely do you see Greenway people parking there. I mentioned to you before that Dana wants to get a public parking map. And that's one of the things that we would want to do that. And Corey and I have been talking a lot about what does this removal of the parking mean for the people who use that for the Greenway. So we are aware of it.
That would be good because the width diminishes and gets narrower and narrower. And I see people parking where there's just barely the width for their vehicle, and it's dangerous getting in and out of cars and stuff. So that'd probably be a good thing.
Yeah, people are taking risks right now. That's right.
Yep. All right, thank you. Any other questions about this one?
Okay, so that summed it up for the transportation projects. So we are going to keep moving and talk about parks and recreation facilities bonds, which I know Corey is super excited about these possibilities. So the first project that we are looking to potentially include in the $10 million would be the build out of Purser Halsey. So this design was approved by the board back in 2018, can certainly be adjusted as desired. But what it includes right now is an all abilities playground, the completion of additional nature trails, picnic shelters, pond and pier build out, as well as an amphitheater, splash park, clubhouse, and more. So the dog park, of course, was previously completed. There is also maybe a potential for some partnership with Mecklenburg County on some of the amenities within this park property as well. But the old estimate was 6 million. So we do know that it does need to be updated in order to have a more accurate picture.
Is there a document somewhere I can refer to that breaks this down into each one of these segments and how much each one costs or is quoted for?
Corey.
And that's
Yes, I have the information from 2018 where the designer broke down each amenity and the projected cost.
also, are we under any kind of obligation to the county to develop this park in a certain period of time?
Period of time, no. But
Okay.
when it is developed per the agreement, it is, say, on the town's back, but we feel good about our relationship to where we would go back to them and say, hey, let's partner with this.
Thank you. And that document is on the city website, or is it something you have
It's on my laptop.
on your
I
laptop?
can send it to you.
Okay, and I'd like to see that. Thank you.
I think the most exciting thing about this project for me is the amphitheater. When I think about some of the concerts and things we have, how many seat will that be, Corey?
It's going to be lawn seating. So depending on how close people want to get, I want to say I'd be guessing at the acreage at least maybe acre and a half. As far
But
as
it would be
size.
significantly larger than.
It will be
Stumptown
larger
Park.
than Stumptown,
So we could,
yes.
I know when the symphony and stuff comes in, we're really stretched to the max. So that'd be a great place. And I think of areas around town, like over at South Park where they have the amphitheater. It's really nice.
Yes, it's going to be nice.
I would just like to add that I think we should all stay vigilant about these two parcels. It should be nice to complete that, what a nice, whatever entrance.
And I'll share with you, I bring that up quite often to Mecklenburg County. And for some reason, does not rise on their radar. They see the property is, you can build a park with what we have, but we'll continue to look at it and also talk to the county about it.
The other thing I think that's really nice about this is it has to remain 50% passive, correct?
Correct.
So there'll be a lot of green space. We're not gonna, pave everything over and just put, baseball fields and tennis courts. It's gonna be a big portion of it remain passive. So that's nice. Any other questions for Corey?
I'll also point out, you see the near where Hazen had his pointer, that building is now across the street. That was going to be the fire station. That building on the corner, right there, yes.
Mhm.
And Corey, that document that you're referring to, is it public ready? That it could be actually put a link on the website?
Yes, yeah, it was in the memo from 2018. I can make it available.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next one is some additional funding to complete the Matthews downtown loop. So the segments that we are specifically talking about in this funding total, I believe they are in red on this map. So the concept for this project, as you'll recall, is essentially the ability to sort of circumnavigate the core of Matthews via multi-use paths. And we, of course, have 4 Mile Creek Greenway and some other greenway segments or multi-use path segments that have been completed, but there are some additional segments that do not qualify for tourism funding. We tried really hard and we could not get the green light on that. So we would be needing general fund dollars to complete the red segments, and felt that it was something worthy to consider as part of the bond package to complete this vision. We've talked about putting signage along the entire loop, and some additional steps to really kind of make it an event, make it something for families or people to be able to do together, to be able to get all the way around Matthews, not having to be in their cars. All right, we'll keep rolling. And the next one is park improvements. We definitely heard varying opinions on all of these projects. I think there's more interest in some than others, but wanted to include them. And Corey, I think, also identified one or more additional ones. So Corey, do you want to talk about these projects for just a minute?
Yes. So these rankings were done internally within the department, really with anecdotal information, what we hear the most, and then along with some call it staff opinion. Squirrel Lake Park, was renovated back in 2012, and I guess the project shown here is addressing the slope issue to the rear of the bathroom. If you can picture the playground, it does have that natural slope down toward the sidewalk. And we're just increasingly having these issues with, really migration of the playground surfacing, and then those subsequent impacts on the sidewalk and just ability for participants to navigate around in the playground. So that first project would address that. That cost is an estimate we got roughly 2 years ago, I'll say, where a company, that was what they quoted to do some of the work, or do the work. Moving on to number 2, Windsor Park. The picnic shelter is the second most reserved facility we have in our inventory, mainly because it is the next largest facility next to Squirrel Lake Park for those larger birthday parties, and feel like a bathroom, given the length of stay for most visitors that use it for that, bathroom would be something that they'd be able to take advantage of. And then moving on to project number 3, Squirrel Lake Park. Like I mentioned, we did the renovation back in 2012. So we are, as of this year, looking at that 10 years and looking at what we just described a moment ago, with the length of time between when, say, the bonds are or would be approved to when we actually implement, we'd likely be at around, could be at 15 years, looking at the use life of the equipment. Number 4, looking at bathrooms in Rice Park. Again, looking at what we hear, many visitors, they would prefer to use a bathroom and not a porta-john. And I do think Rice Park would be that next opportunity. Number 5, now number 5 is, call it less attractive. It is truly, or mainly, looking at maintenance. Right now we have the bridge of the creek through Windsor Park, and maintenance staff is physically, riding mowers through the creek, and visitors are stepping on these stepping stones to get to the other side of the park. No issues. It's, we can certainly have stepping stones in the creek, but it is, call it convenience. And I guess it would be somewhat of a aesthetic improvement to have a nice bridge, but we would want to build something where the mowers could park in the parking lot, drive across it, and address any maintenance issues on the other side of the creek. And also, again, for people, although I do believe the kids love to just jump in the creek for some reason. Moving on, number 6, we have Sardis Park. Again, moving toward 10 years, that the equipment installed in there, excluding the swings, which we just bought this year, that equipment is roughly 12 years old right now. So again, looking at, say, potentially in 5 years, be reaching the end of its use life. And then just with the recent conversations with fitness equipment, and again, playing off of what we continue to hear, I do think 4 Mile Creek, or even along the Heritage Trail, we have some opportunities where there's space alongside the trails where we could add some fitness equipment, people that are already out, they'd be able to take advantage of it, and we certainly be able to, provide that opportunity for them.
Corey, has there ever been any complaints from the public about the lack of bathroom facilities at Stumptown Park? I know they're in the back of the clinic, but has there been any comments to the town or to the Parks and Rec Department about that?
Not so much about Stumptown. I believe we added those in 2012, I think it was also. Not so many comments about Stumptown, but more about some of the other parks.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard something?
No, I'm just
Okay.
curious. I'm just
Gotcha.
curious that our premier park doesn't have, dedicated restrooms for it. And that always puzzled me. I just was wondering if it was an issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's in relatively close proximity. We did, I'll say we did add, 4 restrooms. We were cognizant of having 2 family bathrooms along with the male and female. I'll say for events, it certainly meets the need. The drop-ins, they typically don't really use the bathrooms that often. They're there for maybe half an hour or so, but certainly for events, from what I hear, it meets the need.
Okay, thanks.
So Commissioner Tefano, I mean, there's bathrooms out there. Are you saying they're just not very convenient and they're not easy to find and people have to ask where are the bathrooms?
Yeah, especially like when we were putting on the Memorial Day ceremony and everybody was asking where the restrooms are. And we always had to say, that way. And I had to make a special announcement in that respect. I just always thought it was curious that we didn't have dedicated restroom facilities. But if there's no complaints and they seem to be serving well, then that's fine.
Yeah, and one of those things where like during events, like we have the A-frame signs out in the middle of the gravel lot, usually pretty visible to help, curb some of those questions. And, maybe that's something we need to do for.
Sure.
the other
Very good.
events too.
Thanks.
I don't want to be too crass, but the comments I've heard over the years as an elected official is the lack of bathrooms doesn't prevent people from going to the bathroom. Let's leave it at that. So I've heard those complaints. So I would like to see a facility that people can go to and close the door and go to the bathroom.
Yes.
We have received complaints at all these parks that don't have bathrooms.
All right, so looking at bond projects for greenways and trails. So when we were having a conversation during the planning conference, we looked at 4 Mile Creek Greenway. Staff took the next step to look at it a little bit closer and really diving into what call it the gaps in the property ownership along that section of 4 Mile Creek. Buy myself some time here. You pulling up Polaris? So the gaps between where 4 Mile Creek ends today and where we want to see it extended, there's a lot of county property, but then there is a lot of personal or private property that we feel is going to be a tough hill to climb. So I had conversations with staff at Mecklenburg County, actually Friday, and 4 Mile Creek Greenway is not one of their next 30 projects. So 4 Mile Creek leaving Matthews headed west is not in their top 30. Now they have broken down that entire project into 3 segments. And I believe the segment closest to or beginning at Ray Road heading east is in their top 30, but not the one in Matthews heading west. But they also did share that Irvins Creek Greenway. Well, while we're looking here, you can see the gap. So the green is county property, and you can see where 4 Mile Creek ends today. So we would have to, the initial haul would be getting to the next piece of county property. Yeah, we can see the white is Charlotte and the pinkish is Matthews. So you see the gaps where we certainly see it's going to be a tough nut to crack. And again, that's the primary reason that this project is not as high, say, on Mecklenburg County's radar as it is ours. We did a feasibility study 3 years ago, I believe it was. And so there's a proposed route, and it did identify the properties that would need to be acquired along the route. Certainly there's some deep lots back here, but then there's also cases like along here where it's, it's pretty tight. And again, like with any project, partnerships raise the rankings of some of them. So if the town were to, say dive into this, it may impact that ranking, but right now it is not one of the top 30. But one that is Irvins Creek Greenway.
Corey, before you go to that, I've heard that the county is trying to buy the Williams property at Pleasant Plains and Weddington Road there.
We had a conversation with Bert Lynn, and I believe they did pass that project on to their real estate division, and they were working towards that.
That'd be great, right?
Yeah.
That'd be a big chunk.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. So today, this is the Irvins Creek Greenway project that was kicked off, say a little over a month ago. And the next segment would extend from here at Lakeview Circle to McAlpine Creek Park. And that is one of the next 30 projects that Mecklenburg County plans to complete. So staying with I guess in the context of greenways and projects, if it is promoted as such, certainly keeping 4 Mile Creek, say in the back of your mind, but this could be call it the more imminent project that we could help complete.
I'm glad to see this whole area, not just Matthews, but Charlotte and Mecklenburg County and really the whole state to finally embrace greenways and building these. A lot of municipalities like Kansas City and Cleveland, Ohio started building these back in the 30s and 40s when you could buy land for $20 an acre, and they have huge greenways that stretch for miles and miles. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball, but I really like to see all this energy and efforts to connect everything together. I think we're going to have a really incredible system. Someday, we've got a pretty good one now, but someday it's going to be, when they connect everything up, be great to get on your bicycle and ride for miles and miles and miles on a greenway without, getting on a road.
Exactly. And you see, this will be connecting to the greater system around Mecklenburg County with McAlpine Creek and, what's the other one?
Campbell Creek.
Campbell Creek, yes. With all those being connected.
Any questions for Corey?
All right. So again, the next steps that we are looking at from the board would be if there is a general consensus that these are the right projects to be focusing on as part of the potential bond package. Certainly have taken notes on some slight adjustments on a couple of them. But if the town board is in agreement with that, then staff plans to pursue cost estimates from folks who do that for a living to help nail down, exactly what we're looking at for some of these projects, which will then allow you to make more informed choices about what may ultimately be able to fit within a package. Do we need to scale things down? Do we need to hurry up and act on some of them if a bond is ultimately approved, really just to have more informed information as we move forward. If these projects do also appear to be within the realm of what we're looking at pursuing, we would also want staff to at least get started on the framework for the public information campaign, if you will, the public information effort that will be undertaken as a part of this, to make sure that if the board ultimately decides to move forward, that we're ready to start moving on getting that information out in a comprehensive way. As mentioned on your board agenda tonight would be the consideration of proceeding with bond counsel to help guide us through the legal process that is associated with all of this. And then they will be providing a calendar if they are hired to help keep everyone on track. And again, based on what I saw, they're looking at a more formal coalescing of totals and general projects within approximately the next 30 to 45 days to keep everything on track. But before any of that was affirmed, we would be looking to bring those cost estimates back to you. And the board has multiple additional steps to take that involve formalizing your agreement to proceed with this process before everything's officially a go. So happy to answer any additional questions or take any additional feedback.
Commissioner Garner?
I have a question for Corey. I'm sorry that you sat down. I should have asked it a minute ago. Have you considered adding any community gardens to this? And, you know, I feel like they're probably a low cost, but could add some shiny novelty to the to the bond package.
It could certainly be added. I believe the next garden project we have on our list is somewhere in Crestdale, finding that place to install one. Short answer is yes.
Okay, and maybe possibly two. I mean, just as one person on the board, I think, you know, that one side of Matthews is, you know, there are parts of Matthews that could use a community garden as well.
And like you mentioned, they are relatively inexpensive, and we could certainly absorb, you know, a garden in our budget. But yeah, we certainly make it part of the bond project too. I'm sorry. Yes, maintenance.
Thank you.
Well, I think staff's done a great job in putting these together, taking the clues from the board. And I think the beauty of a bond is it's really not us deciding, it's the people that live here deciding. So if these things are important to our constituents, then they can vote it up or down, depending on what their feelings are. So that's why I think it's good. These are things that would make the quality of life here better, I think. And I think it's good to put it before the public and let them vote on it see if they're willing to pay for it. Are there any other comments before we take a quick break before our 7 o'clock meeting? Any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Matthews Mayor John Higdon. Welcome to our March 28th, 2022 regular town council meeting. We had a meeting at 5:30 tonight to discuss some other town business, and now we're ready for our regular meeting. I'd like to start with some introductions. On my left and your right is Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk, soon to be Town Manager Becky Hawk. We have Commissioner Renee Garner. Commissioner Larry Whitley is in Hawaii, but he's joining remotely. Lucky guy. Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool. Town Manager Hazen Blodgett. That may be the last time I say that. Get a tissue. We have Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark DeFano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, the invocation by Mr. Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. All those who care to, please join me in prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, as we gather this evening, we give you thanks for the many blessings of life. We ask that you be with this board tonight and grant them the courage and the wisdom to make the just and right decisions that affect the town today and tomorrow. And we ask that you put your arms around all of our first responders, that you keep them from harm's way, and our troops, wherever they may be stationed around the world. We ask especially that you bring peace to the people of the Ukraine and give them your love and support. We ask that you gather this evening, as all those who gathered, you allow them to return to their home safely. These things we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Town Manager, do we have any items to be added to the agenda tonight?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Lori has informed me that nobody has signed up for public comment, but if anybody in our audience would care to, they can walk up to the podium at this time. Those in the Zoom audience can use the Zoom's raise hand feature. If you're on a desktop or mobile device, click raise hand in the webinar controls and you'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. If you joined by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Once you're called on, please unmute yourself, turn on your camera if you have one, and state your name for the record. You will have up to 4 minutes to speak, and Maureen will call on people by their name and number. Maureen, do we have anybody that's expressed an interest tonight? All right. Move on to item 6, the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through H4.
I have a second. Second. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Larry, I assume you voted yes?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Move on to item 7, unfinished business. 7A, receive an update on Matthews Veteran Memorial Park design, Corey King, and what for the one of the first times I can ever remember, you're early in our agenda. Corey's usually the last person to speak, so glad we got you early tonight.
I think that was by the grace of someone in a room one Tuesday morning. So as promised, we're returning with an update to the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park when we are at 90% completion of the design documents, which we are now. Just could you scroll down to the, let's see. Keep going. Yeah. Keep you can stop right there. So from the last meeting, really no changes to the plan. The design firm did make the requested changes from staff, fixing some of the curve lines of the concrete cuts, some other call it administrative things we wanted them to identify on the plans, but the concept, what we plan to build is in place. One note with the education panels, the design of the rest of the park has exceeded the design of or the conversation about the education panels and what will actually be on the panels. The Veterans Advisory Committee and Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee are still working through that to see what the ultimate design is going to be. So staff does recommend removing that element from this project, or removing it from the actual bid. And when that information is ready, we'll plan to contract that out as its own project to then install when it's ready. Actually, can you scroll down to the very last page? I believe one question was about the fencing. It is not spec'd or there's no plan view of it, but this is from the design firm, from the company that we plan to use. And you'll see it does mimic the fencing that is along Trade Street outside of Stumptown Park today. The exception would be the brick. It would be just an aluminum fencing with that style post and that style top and the pickets along the northern edge of the park. I guess if there are any questions.
Well, Corey, I'd like to thank you for the update, and I really appreciate the fence. I know some of the veterans were concerned that people were walking through the back of the property over the monument area. So we need some way to prevent that from happening. Commissioner Tufano?
Yes, I just want to make a congratulatory statement. As commander of the American Legion, I requested that the POW MIA flag fly at the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park. A lot of people don't know this. It's the only other flag other than the American flag that's ever flown above the White House. And it's flown every day below the American flag at a U.S. post office around the country. And it's because of a congressional act in 1990 stating that there were 6 days a year that were dedicated to flying the POW MIA flag. Within 24 hours, that flag was up at the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park. It meant a lot to me. It means a lot to a lot of veterans. And I wanted to thank the town staff for their sudden service, we'll put it that way. And it was just so appreciated by so many people. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Public Works. One note about bidding, like I said, we are at 90%, very close to 100. And then we are still making decisions about when to actually bid the project, really looking at windows, when events would be the least impacted. At this point, we're still evaluating. We may be able to get it done in June. It'd be a push, may likely be closer to the early August for when we hope to say begin construction. But again, it will be a bid process, at least relatively soon. Again, just deciding on schedule right now.
Corey, could you go back a couple slides? I think to slide 14, maybe.
That's the landscape. Oh, was that what you wanted?
I was wanting to see the entrance and exit there. That's good. That they've been made more level.
Yes.
Equal.
Yes, they're on a pretty equal plane. You know, the one on the right really is just with the, the bend in the sidewalk. It will likely be more horizontal than what's shown here on the plan.
Okay, Commissioner Tufano?
Yeah, Corey, on those entry pillars, is there a plaque saying Matthews Veterans Memorial Park on each of those?
There will be.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think this is great. I recently met with a couple of veterans from MVAC, and I've been in contact with MVAC's chair, May, and so great job. Looking forward to seeing it completed.
I'm excited.
All right, any other comment? Hearing none. Thank you, Corey. We'll move on to the next item. Consider increasing board salaries. Tanya McGovern.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. As you recall, at the planning conference, you all discussed increasing the board salaries. So just bringing that item back for you all to discuss and make a decision if you would like to. Attached to the memo was the information that was also shared at the planning conference about the board salaries and benefits of the other boards around us. So I'm happy to, if you have any questions for me, answer those.
Just a question,
Commissioner Tafano.
please. Are we going to resolve the technology allowance before we make any decision on the base salary? What is the
That's
procedure?
up to the board.
It's my understanding that anything we vote on would not, is this correct, Mr. Buckley, that this wouldn't go into effect until the next board is elected? Is that correct?
Expansive, that's correct.
So I think we could make a decision on this and address the technology allowance at our next meeting or whatever.
Very
It's not gonna
good.
go into effect for a
Very
long
good.
time anyway.
Yep, thank you.
But as to raises, that would have to be a part of the annual budget.
Right.
And just to speak to that a little bit more, so the $9,000 was the amount that the board had discussed at the planning conference. That has been put into the proposed FY23 budget that staff is working on right now that you'll see in May. So I think the purposes of tonight would be just to allow the board to affirm that that is your desire to see that included in the budget. I think some of the discussion was just around making this a publicly informed conversation to provide full transparency.
So is there any comments, questions about the proposal to raise the salaries to 9,000 from the current 5,500 plus technology allowance? Commissioner Hoover.
Yes, I would just like to say to have a clear conscience here, I will not support an increase until we get under control the fire and police pay, because as a board, that, in my opinion, should come before us looking at how much we are going to make a pay for ourselves. And I know that's a big chunk of money, but they are top priority. And to me, they should come first.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Garner?
I did some outreach to see how supporters of the board, just how our constituents felt about giving the board a raise, and didn't hear any negative feedback, and had a few questions asked, but just wanted that on the record that people were generally supportive of this. And I feel like we all do a lot of work and can do both a raise for the board as well as raise the pay of our fire and police when the budget season is upon us, and we can start working on those numbers too.
Yeah, I'm sometimes surprised. I don't know why, I probably shouldn't be, but a lot of people believe that the commissioners and mayor, this is our only job, that this is our full-time job. All of us also have one or more other full-time jobs besides this. And it's not unusual. I was a commissioner for 3 terms. I've been, mayor, I'm in my 2nd term. It's certainly not unusual. As a commissioner, I've worked 40 plus hours in a week on behalf of the town. So we don't undertake this effort to make a lot of money, but I think, a small amount, I don't think $9,000 per year for a job that probably typically is, if you're doing it right, is taking at least 20 hours a week. I think $9,000 a year is not excessive. And it's also in line with other municipalities around us, what other municipalities are paying their elected leaders. It's also been brought up that if we paid a little bit more, we might encourage somebody that otherwise financially couldn't afford to dedicate that amount of time to be an elected official. Maybe they could be able to do it. I also want to make sure everybody understands that this does not affect the mayor's salary. So the mayor's salary would not increase. It would stay the same. So I've always said I would go along with the consensus of the board, but I do think it's reasonable. I don't think we need to be the lowest paid in the entire region, or, I think we should be at least get paid average what other communities value these positions at. Commissioner Tufano?
I just want to be clear, is this would not go into effect until the budget hearing, and it would be a formal vote at that point? Help me understand this.
We are voting to allow the town manager to prepare for the eventuality that was what the pay would be. We will, of course, debate the budget, and it could be adjusted at that time if there was a desire to do so.
So we're just instructing staff to complete the study. Would that be a correct statement?
I think they're allocating the funds as if we made this decision. And to be clear, this would not go into effect until the next board is elected. Is that correct? No?
No. Once you adopt the budget, it takes effect for the next
Following
fiscal
year.
year.
Okay.
Fiscal year. So you'll adopt the budget in June. It'll take effect July 1
Okay, very good. That was not clear.
for the public.
But again, just to be clear, we're not authorizing increases in salaries until the budget hearing and the budget is
Absolutely.
voted on.
That's
Is that
absolutely-
correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Garner?
Is this considered a public hearing for this, or if the public wants to speak on it, would that happen at the budget meeting?
That would happen at the budget meeting, correct? This is just a result of the planning conference and staff bringing this information back to you to keep the issue alive or to die, whichever the board desires.
So I think it would be appropriate, if there's no more conversation, to take a vote on this if we want to authorize the town manager to allocate $9,000 per year starting in July of 2022 for the positions of commissioners in the town of Matthews. Would anybody care to make a motion or not?
Well, we've got to be careful with that motion because you're not now, let's see how we want to word this so that you're just directing staff to include this proposal in the budget. You're not actually voting on this amount or this raise tonight. So the
Correct.
public understands that.
Right. To put it in the budget, and that would certainly allow for lots more public input.
Correct.
So would anybody care to make that motion or another motion?
I'll make that motion. So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Mr. Buckley, can you repeat the motion?
The motion is, and I'm going to have to stumble with this a little bit. What your motion, I believe, is that you're now going to authorize staff in the preparation of the fiscal year 22-23 to include a suggested budget, a suggested raise for the commissioners to $9,000 a year as a part of the budget process.
And
I heard an echo.
Commissioner Garner, do you second that? Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I just want to make clear that I will be voting on the affirmative of this with the understanding that this is not a vote to raise our salaries. This is a vote to merely consider it in the budget, and that there will be additional comments made during the budget period.
I'm certain there will be. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So that passes 5-2 with Commissioners. Larry, vote again.
Yes.
And raise-
Yes.
Commissioner, if you'll identify yourself and vote.
Larry Whitley, yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, that passes 5-2 with Commissioners Urban and Hoover in opposition. All right, we'll move on to new business. 8A, consider new public art sculpture. Melissa Johnson, I just saw you a second ago, remote, so the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Board of Commissioners, and staff. I am presenting our chosen sculptures and locations for our first outdoor sculpture gallery in downtown Matthews. This gallery will feature different sculptures on loan to the town from a variety of regional sculptors for 1 calendar year. Each location will have a round pedestal base made of concrete that will be installed by Public Works, and the pedestals will be 36 inches in diameter. They will vary in height depending on the location. So these are all of the different locations. We have 5, and we have 5 different sculptures that the advisory committee has chosen for each location. They were approved at the last advisory committee meeting. We did take a lot into consideration when choosing the actual pieces for each actual location, including the size, the color. Safety was, of course, number 1. So part of the criteria for even submitting art for this sculpture gallery was that they were safe, that nothing is going to fall off, no sharp pieces or edges that anybody could get hurt on when they climb on it, because you know they will. So I can go through each location. I do have specific details. I don't know how much information you want about each actual piece. Happy to answer any questions you may have about each piece. So at Town Hall, if you're looking at Town Hall in the left flower garden, this is where this piece conceived by Adam Walls will go. This piece is 8 feet high, but no climbable parts and nothing that anybody would get hurt on. So that is that chosen location, and the base will be fairly low to the ground. This specific planter by Pizza Peel on Trade Street, it's the only one of the 3 brick planters that's raised that does not have a tree in the middle of it. So there will be a concrete base there in the middle, and this piece by a local artist will be put there. And all of those edges, I know it's hard to tell in the picture, but all of the edges are rounded. So there's no sharp edges on there. And this one is only 30 inches high. So it's a fun piece that'll stand out. The next location is the corner of Charles Street and Trade Street, so across from Beer Temple. And this milk can bouquet by Jeff Crane will go there. That sculpture itself is 77 inches high. So it's a taller piece, but it is out of line of sight for traffic. It has been cleared. And the next piece will go in front of the Matthews Community Center. If you're looking at the front of the building, it will be to the left in the flower bed. And this particular piece, Translunar Paradise, is one of the taller pieces. It is 8 feet high. So again, that base will sit lower to the ground. And at the Greenway entrance on Trade Street, this one will sit back in that landscaped area. And this piece is 10 feet high, but the colors will help it stand out in that section there. So tonight we are seeking confirmation and approval for each of these sculptures at the chosen locations for our first outdoor sculpture gallery in downtown Matthews.
All right, thank you, Melissa. I think it's great. I really like the idea that the pieces will be rotated on an annual basis, and it just keeps it fresh and new things to look at. And I think it's fantastic. Commissioner Tafano.
How long do we have these for, Melissa? I'm sorry, you probably said that. I didn't hear it.
For 1 year.
1 year only for each piece?
Yes.
Okay, and how often will they be rotated?
Each year. So at the end of the year, we'll have new pieces installed.
Oh, new pieces. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And this dollar amount is going to be a standard stipend for each of the artists?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or motions? Commissioner Urban.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the 5 sculptures, 5 locations for the Outdoor Sculpture Gallery based on the memo dated March 22nd, 2022 by Melissa Johnson, our Cultural Recreation Manager.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Urban, a second from Commissioner Tufano. All in favor?
Aye.
Larry, I think you need to say your name again. So
Larry Whitley, yes.
that's the price you pay for being in Hawaii, my friend. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go on to item 8B, receive the monthly budget report from Teresa Falk.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Once again, we're back to talk about how things are going in the town of Matthews, and I am happy to report that things are going well for the town. Avalon tax revenues are trending almost 2% higher in collection rate year over year versus last year at the same time. Local option sales tax continues to trend up, and we are at 19.2% above where we were at the same time last year. And to touch on that, to Commissioner Garner's question last month when we were talking about this, I went back and did a little research, and we are trending 36.96% higher than fiscal year FY19. However, FY19 was beginning, the new sales tax law went into effect on November the 1st, 2018. So it was only the second half. But prior to that even with the new rule going into effect for half the year, FY19 was at an increase of 9.3% over FY18. FY20, of course, we all know the last quarter of FY20 is when the world was shut down and nothing was open. Going into that fourth quarter, we were almost 6% ahead of FY19. But then when everything shut down, we still ended the year 0.5% higher than the prior year. And FY21 finished the year 16% higher than FY20. So sales tax just continue to amaze us and increase and improve. And I think going along with that is that things are open back up. Recreation revenues are 122% higher than they were last year at the same time, which again attests to the fact that everything is open back up and people are getting out. Occupancy tax is up 71.74% over last year at the same time. And rental car tax is up 45.72% year over year. So people are coming back and they're getting out, and that is great news for the town of Matthews.
Fantastic. I mean, once again, another great report. Any questions, comments? I mean, some of these percentages are Charlie and I are sitting here saying, wow, wow, wow. So that's really great news.
Yes, that's what Becky and I were saying during those budget planning sessions last week. It was like, wow, oh, this is very good.
All right. Well, we appreciate the update. If there's
Thank
no
you.
questions, we'll move on. Item 8C, consider updates to the comprehensive plan downtown overlay district, strengthen architectural guidelines. Mr. Camp.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be following that rosy budget update for my request this evening. As a follow-up to some of our lengthy discussions at the planning conference, I am bringing to you this evening a request for us to kickstart potentially a long process to update the town's land use plan. You'll see it here in the memo that it's actually a dual request. We would like to hopefully simultaneously update the town's downtown master plan, which was updated last in 2013, as well as the town's land use plan back in 2012. You'll see under bullet point 2 that the School of Government generally recommends, based on the new 160D requirements, that plans be updated at least every 10 years, but for fast growing communities like Matthews, probably more like every 5 years. And, just to reiterate, we talked about really the importance of a comp plan, and this would be a transition to you'll notice the differences in terminology. Our current land use plan is just that. It primarily focuses on land use, where the shopping centers go, where the apartment communities go. A comprehensive plan is more holistic. It's looking more at economic development, affordable housing opportunities, open space preservation, public facility needs. So you kind of wrap all of that into one document. So that's sort of if you're noticing that I kind of refer to it in different ways, that is the reasoning why. We do strongly recommend that council at least help us out with the first step this evening to consider authorizing staff to go ahead and begin prepping an RFP to go out for a request for proposals, to have firms submit their concepts for what these plans could look like. We do feel like there could be some cost savings. So this is really two-pronged. We desperately need to update both documents, and doing it simultaneously could result in cost savings. So that's why we are recommending going out with an RFP that allows firms to either bid on these projects separately or as a package. So that is the request. If you scroll down just a little more, I think, Maureen, I think we're just asking for authorization to go out for that RFP. And I pulled a few additional comments up I want to make, and I promise I'll stop talking in a moment, but a few things to keep in mind when you think about comp plans. The first is they provide continuity. So staff changes, boards change over time, but they provide a level of continuity that's really, really important. They're a community vision at the end of the day. And it's something that, you all have elections every 2 years, right? Staff turns over all the time, but it lets the community's vision move on regardless of changes. It lets you look at shaping the appearance of the community. You can promote economic development. Very important for the work we do and for your decisions, it provides justification. So you're pointing, we're not making up reasons for saying no or reasons for saying yes, right? Like you'll see that when we make recommendations on zoning decisions now, we're always pointing to the land use plan as our guiding document. It's just not the whims of the planning department saying this or this, right? It's what the community has said. So that's my speech this evening on the comp plan, and hope to get some support for you.
Mr. Hoover.
Okay. I understand the need to update these items, but help me understand why it could cost up to $250,000 for this, because this is the issue I have with stuff costing so much. We can find money for stuff like this, but when we have a need where it really should go, as for me, the fire and police department, it just can, bam, go right to things like this. So I'm having a hard time understanding that.
And it may well be less. Every community is different. The components of the document, they are tailored to the community that they are created in. So these are not things that you can pull off the shelf and say, well, there was a great plan up in Huntersville 2 years ago. Can we just replicate that in Matthews? I mean, they are more or less custom designed for your community because they are drawing on the specific needs. So the last plan that we found in Mecklenburg County that was done was Davidson's. Davidson's What's Next plan was $125,000. We've got a few different examples of downtown plans that were in the realm of 80 to 100,000.
The downtown master plan was revised on June 25th of 2018. Can we go a little longer with that one?
That was a very minor revision. If I recall, that modified the alignment of Andrew Caroline Drive. So now that road was to terminate at Matthews Station up here by KP Park. I think I'm pointing the right direction. The alignment was moved onto the hospital property and may be built by the hospital or as a public-private partnership. But the bulk of the document, about 99% of it, is from 2013. And while I'm speaking, maybe I should have gone into a little more detail. We obviously have light rail planned in downtown Matthews. We've had some, quite intense conversations about our downtown design guidelines and in response to the Exxon station removal and some of the projects that are proposed there and throughout town. So we felt that this was a good time to look at those updates to the design guidelines, which date really to the late 90s. I think Mayor Myers was the mayor when those were first adopted, probably 97 or 99. We first adopted our design guidelines. So they're about a quarter century old now.
Commissioner,
thank you.
I guess I would say, I think your question's a good one. The way I see it is it's not either or, it's kind of both. I mean, I think that the planning conference illustrated kind of these potential gaps. I mean, we talked to Holly Springs recently, and they do every plan every 5 years. And I think, you know, we've watched all these apartments come up, and I think we're all in a little bit of a quandary of where do we go next? And I think this board's got some vision about on the bond side. My views, at least in Jay's case, he's talking about, okay, how about on the planning and land use side? And I know Becky's got a plan to talk about pay in class. So I know these are expensive projects, but I don't think like we're going to do one and not do the other. I do see this as a comprehensive vision to bring to you all.
Mr. Tefano?
Yes, has a serious consideration been given to the fact that we're constantly paying for consulting fees for these type of updates and plans? Serious consideration been given to actually hiring someone capable of performing these functions. These amounts would bring in quite an accomplished designer and planner, and someone we could have on staff to do these types of functions throughout the year. I'm just asking as a rhetorical question, has any consideration been given to that at all in previous discussions or by staff?
So we have never looked at it in that vein. From my perspective, these are very, very specialized endeavors that, you know, these design firms have a team of people, you know, landscape design, you know, a whole team of folks that come together. I think to find that in one person would be very, very unique, very hard to find. And then that's a reoccurring cost. This is while it's expensive, it's a one-time cost. It's not whatever, 10-year cost.
Yeah, this may be a one-time cost, but are there other one-time costs that occur throughout the year that the cumulative or aggregate of them would warrant looking at having our own staff to perform these functions?
But don't we see a breadth of these one-time that go across the spectrum of expertise? You're not going to get one person or two people to be able to extend the spectrum of all these specializations.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just bringing the question up, asking if there's been serious consideration of that in the past at all. And it appears that there has not.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
So we do have the bandwidth to create some of these documents in-house. And if you were to look at our website, the majority, I think all of our area plans were done in-house. Most recently, the Eastern Gateway Plan. The land use plan was done during the recession last time when we were not moving at the speed we are moving now. But frankly, the capacity for a small planning department to undertake a document of this magnitude right now, it's not that we don't have the technical capacity, it's time. And these things are very time consuming. I'll also say that an outsider's perspective for a document like this can also be important, to bring in someone that works in different communities, knows what some of the issues are outside Matthews, and they can bring kind of that fresh vision sometimes, which is really crucial.
Mr. Garner.
I do think when these questions come up, almost every time we talk about, does it make more sense to hire a person or does it make more sense to bring in a consultant? And when you do see the consultants come in, they bring a team of people with them who sort of have their own different perspective that round out what we end up with in the final document. To Commissioner Hoover's comment, I was just looking at last year's budget. And again, I think it is important to remember that this is a one-time cost and not a recurring cost. It's a little bit unfair to say that we aren't putting money into the police department because we added nearly $1 million to their budget last year. And planning and development got an additional $6,000. So, this helps them do their work more efficiently. And I think, when we're looking at documents like this, whether it's us or it's the next board that comes along, the next people who are interested in serving, it will provide that continuity. It'll also give a perspective. It will provide some of our perspective where we're looking at documents that from the board a decade ago that influenced that comprehensive plan. this will add what we are hearing from residents, from our constituents, to create a comprehensive plan for the future of Matthews.
Commissioner Hoover, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I knew that had been given. It's just that when we have heard, we can't get officers to come here because we pay low. You know, we've got only 24 actual patrol officers. And when we're growing like we are, we need to have, our citizens need to be well protected, fire and medic and police. And if we can't afford to pay them, we ain't gonna get them. So that's how I'm looking at it. So.
Commissioner Urban, do you have a comment, sir?
I think all well founded, really good points. I think Renee's spot on in their conversation. If you spend $100,000 on something that lasts 10 years, it's $10,000 a year. You're not going to hire somebody for $10,000 a year. The comprehensive plan is really a horizontal plan. The downtown plan is really a vertical plan. So that's two separate entities. You're not going to get in one person from that aspect of it. I see your point about the police and fire, but we have other buckets. We have to continually lift all boats in some form or fashion from that aspect. And I think it's a tough call from that aspect. But I'm supportive of this because it's important to do, because those conversations that cost us money about affordable housing and connectivity and mobility and stuff like that, we don't have those plans. We tend to be very reactive with petitioners and zoning cases. And that's when we're bound to have a problem. And let's just take, for example, the fact that simply a couple of years ago, updating precinct number 1 may have excluded us having this Exxon conversation. But that takes time and effort and professional to come to the table and do that. So we could have these continually moments if we don't keep the comp plan and the downtown plan working in sync as well. And if you've got a bond for a mobility for $10 million, your comp plan and your downtown plan need to be on par. So, I see it all, but I think we have to realize that most communities are probably doing this on a more regular basis than we are. And I'm sure we're behind on the bicycle plan and this plan and that plan and that plan. We do our best. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I was going to say a similar thing. I do think it's unfair to say we aren't funding police and fire. We also used ARPA funds to give over $1 million for, the hazard pay. So we've done that. Again, we can't neglect one part of the town staff, because for another one, we can do both. I'm genuinely supportive of this. Again, the town has changed a lot since 2012. We all know that. So I think this is a good idea, and I'm in favor of it.
Okay, I'd like to just add my 2 cents if I could. I think you've heard me say several times from this dais that as I, in the corporate world, have traveled all across the country quite a bit, and I've been in areas where you drive through a town and go, wow, they don't have the zoning rules and regulations and overlays and comprehensive plans that Matthews does, because they've just plopped anything that would fit anywhere. And you end up with really dysfunctional, ugly towns. And I think that boards much previous to this one have had that continuity that you talk about, so that we've got something that we can be really proud of here in Matthews. Also, I think it's pretty well known that I'm not a big fan of studies and paying outside consultants. I like to do it as little as possible, but I think in this case, it's very important. And so I'm generally supportive as well. I do think we need to have an updated plan and not rely on one that's a decade or older. So that's my comment. Is there anyone else that would like to state their opinion? Make a motion? John Urban?
If everybody's going to be real quiet, I can do motions all night long. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. We direct staff to create a request for proposals. And that's just a request for proposals for a comprehensive plan and downtown plan with design guidelines as outlined in the memo dated March 24th, 2022 by our J. Camp Planning Director.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further discussion? Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, I just want to ask a legal question. If we go out for requests for proposals, are we required to actually execute one of those proposals? No.
No, sir. You can always reject all proposals.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Larry Whitley, yes.
Yeah, he's got the hang
You
of it.
got it, Larry.
There
All
we
right,
go.
I think that passed unanimously, correct? All right. Okay, that's 7-0 unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Consider exchange of property at Stumptown Park. Mr. Camp.
All right. So sort of an interesting request. This one fell into my lap. This is related to a potential land swap over at Stumptown Park. There was some right-of-way that was closed, I think in 2000, according to plat. When you close right-of-way, of course, property goes to property owners adjoining both sides. What occurred after that, and by the way, this relates to the property at 135 South Fremont Street, currently owned by F&N Properties. Maureen, could you scroll down to the plat? Can you zoom in 1 or 2 clicks? Sorry. All right, so as you can see, there's some kind of odd property lines at the rear of Stumptown Park. This is looking actually from Fremont, so the park is actually screened north here. The proposal, and we began working on this with Frank Williams, I think earlier in 21, Hayes in late 20, early 21. He came to us with a proposal to kind of square up the property lines at the back. There's a fence right here that fences off the F&M Properties, the duplex there from the park. And the proposal would be to swap this piece of land, to move the property line here, make this part of this parcel. And then in return, the town would receive this kind of odd triangle here that would go back to the park. So now, if you look at Polaris, none of that's not true. That's not a survey. Those property lines are very wonky. So this is an actual survey from Russell Whitehurst that was prepared by F&N Properties. The amount of land transferring, I'll add a square footage here. They're in the neighborhood of 400 square feet. And after speaking with Attorney Buckley, land swap is possible because these properties are of very equal size, within a few dozen square feet, and of equal value because they're landlocked. So we do recommend that the board authorize the manager to continue working with F&M Properties to execute this land swap for property at Stumptown Park and at 135 South Fremont Street. Did I get that recommendation right, Charlie? Okay.
So one of the very last times I got to speak with Frank Williams, who was a great person to have in our community before he unfortunately passed away. He was talking about this property. We actually went out to it and he was showing it to me. And I believe it was a result of an error on a plat or whatever from years and years ago. But Frank, in his usual humorous way, was recommending we fix this. And so in honor of Frank Williams Jr., I would like to do this and get it squared away correctly. Do we have any motions?
Before you make the motion, may I make a slight correction?
Sure.
I was involved with that before. It wasn't an error. That's what F&N Properties wanted. And when you close the street, as Jay said, adjoining property owners get to the center line unless they agree to a different division of the property being closed. And F&N wanted that little square, that little triangle there. So that wasn't an error. That was their desire.
I wondered why Charlie was going to backhand me like Will Smith. Of course, it wasn't an error. It was spot on, but it needs to be fixed. So we have a motion.
I think her name was.
I'll make a motion that we approve the land swap with the property at 135 South Fremont Street in accordance with the attached proposed plat.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Garner, a second from Commissioner Urban. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Larry Whitley, yes.
Thank you, Larry Whitley. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8E, consider authorization for manager to enter a contract with bond counsel Scott Leo. Ms. Hawk.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. What we have before you tonight is a proposed engagement letter from Scott Leo, who serves as bond counsel. He works for Parker Poe, and Mr. Leo is regarded as one of the best bond counsel attorneys in the state. And his engagement letter would be to retain him to assist the town in ensuring that we remain in legal compliance, and all of our applications and notifications and public hearings, and basically everything that is involved in proceeding with a voter referendum for a general obligation bond, that we are meeting all of those obligations and keeping this a legal process. So this is specialized work, and it is strongly advised that somebody who specializes in this area be retained to help guide us through the process. Mr. Leo did provide these services to the town the last time that we went through this process back in 2003, 2004. And he has agreed that he would be happy to assist us again. So the way that his rates work is that he does accrue his time on an hourly basis, but he does not collect until everything is over. So if the board decided to abandon this process at any point in time, it is completely within your right to do that. This does not obligate us to move forward. It is just indicating the likelihood that that is the direction that we are heading in. And so if at any point in time you wanted to cease utilizing his services because you ultimately decided not to pursue a bond, then he would just send us a bill for his hours worked, and we would move on. If we do proceed with a general obligation bond, then we have a couple of different options. Payment could come at the end of that process, or if the board ultimately elected to have at least one bond issued within the first 12 months following a successful voter referendum, his services could be rolled into the overall cost of that bond issuance. His work between now and November is expected to cost between $7,500 and $10,000. And then if the board again decided to issue a bond at a later date, he would also be able to provide those services. Those are negotiated separately. It's a separate fee for each bond issuance. The legal fees for each bond issuance are around $40,000, give or take. And that is part of the overall cost that we had discussed previously for each bond issuance between the attorney's fees as well as the other fees. You're looking at about $75,000 to $100,000 per bond issuance. But again, those costs can be rolled into your debt service payments. It's not dollars that you need to pay out separately if you do not wish to do so. But at this point in time, we're just looking for authorization to enter into an engagement with Mr. Leo to begin providing his services to the town over the next few months, if the board is comfortable proceeding with that at this time.
So when we first started talking about general obligation bonds, and if you start Googling or looking on the web, anything about general obligation bonds in North Carolina, you see Scott Leo's name like continually. I mean, he's like the guy that does this sort of thing. So I think we have one of the best. Anybody care to make a motion? Commissioner Tawano?
Yes, the 7,500 to 10,000. What is his hourly rate?
I did not ask that. When we spoke before, he said that he tracks it on an hourly basis and bills for that, but we did not get into what his hourly rate is. But this was his standard fee for this process in assisting a locality through the process from about this time through November.
So regardless of his hourly rate, that 7,500 to 10,000, it would cover
Yes.
anything that happens.
Yes.
Also, is his fee per issuance in any way tied to the dollar amount of the issuance?
No.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. I think we discussed that before. That's why we want to make sure we ask for enough in the bond, because it doesn't matter what it costs the same, whether we go, whatever. Commissioner Urban?
Let's go ahead and make a motion that we authorize the town manager to enter into a contract with Mr. Scott Leo of Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein to serve as bond counsel for the town of Matthews in anticipation of November 2022 voter referendum for the issuance of one or more general obligation bonds. This is all as outlined in the March 28th, 2022 letter by Becky Hawk, Assistant Town Manager.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Larry Whitley from sunny Honolulu, Hawaii said yes.
That passes unanimously. Say hello to Elvis when you see him there.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, move on to 8F, consider offer to sell real property to the town, 227 Morris Road, the Alexander family. Mr. Blodgett.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, you all, I think you all received a letter last month from Mr. Alexander, and has some family property that he would like to sell. And if we could scroll down to, there you go. Thank you very much. And can we, there you go. Okay, so just to orient everybody. So here is East John Street, and there is East Charles Street. So it's about the property is tax value is $367,100. And I talked to Mr. Alexander last week, and he said that they would like to get $400,000 for the property, but they would take tax value. The property is 2.25 acres in size, which is in Matthews, I think we all get excited about that size piece of property. The problem is the configuration, right? That's about 90 feet. I think at the widest, it's 110, and at the narrowest, it's 80, and it averages about 90 feet. And the length is about 1,100 feet. So that's a very usually shaped piece of property, very hard to develop on that kind of width. The board does have options. One of the options would be you could purchase the property from the Alexander family and keep it as open space. That's one thought. Then the other thought would be try to combine it with some adjoining properties and see what kind of economy of scale can you get then to really kind of develop everything in something meaningful. You could use ARPA dollars or even general fund dollars to do that. We talked, staff talked, and of course, from our perspective, like, well, what could, police, fire, parks and rec, use for this piece of property? It's got its limitations. So I would not recommend purchasing this property at this time. I think it's just in and of itself, it's difficult to have immediate value to the town. In my mind, our work would just begin trying to assemble other pieces once we had this piece. And I'd rather see us get if we were going to do something like this, get a more square piece of property to begin with.
Commissioner Urban.
Quick question. If we take no action on this whatsoever, it dies on the vine as well. My personal stance on this is you let private capitalism work, and those adjacent property owners buy it and combine it and create what they want. We could be stuck with it for a very, very long time. So it seems more analogous to have a contingent or an adjacent property owner purchase it down the road. But I just want to clarify on the motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right. We appreciate the Alexander family bringing this to our attention for consideration, but I don't think it fits into our plans at this time. So we will pass. All right, now we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, and that's recognize the gentleman to my left, our retiring town manager, Hazen Blodgett. Lori, can we have a box of tissues, please? Hazen will be retiring, and we're going to take a few minutes to recognize him. We're going to start with a video that David Johnson put together with that Silent Images. I'm going to share it with you now, so let's watch the video.
When I came here 18 years ago, you could tell just coming to the town, there was great potential. Many of us that grew up in the 80s, 90s, maybe even the 2000s, spent all the time in your car. You may grow up in neighborhoods with cul-de-sacs, with or without sidewalks. And I think the country has realized how important staying connected with other people, maybe the pandemic, maybe the recession, but it's really getting out with people and spending time with people. And we want to encourage people to socialize, meet their neighbor, And, you know, it's really a value to the community, and it's healthier, right? To get out of your car and walk around. You know, in many ways, with the town of 30,000 people, we're like a big neighborhood, and that's a luxury, really. I mean, we're not in a city of 900,000, we're in a city of 30, and I think to learn to work together, you're not always going to get your way, but if somebody, one of your neighbors benefits, that's good too. You know, for a town like Matthews, we really do want to keep that small town feel. It's really the heart and soul of our community. And, you know, from staff to the town board to the community, that's all part of an expectation that we have. And it's one of our vision statements to keep a small town flavor. So it's very important to us to nurture small businesses. It's really, we consider the heart and soul of the town. You know, those businesses stay engaged in the community. They give back to the community, and it's really an asset to what we stand for. Yeah, it's really kind of a sense of place. We work with Matthews Historical Foundation, and you know, that's one of the oldest houses in town, and you know, it adds character. You know, we talked about, actually there was discussion about moving it, and the Charlotte Landmarks Commission said no. Set and setting is very important, and that's a good example of to have a house there for the next 100 years that looks so different from modern architecture, but really does help people harken back to a different area. You know, the coffee shop, you know, what a great example of a style of house that rarely do you see anymore. Well, sure, you know, leaving people is tough, but 18 years is a long time. You know, in theory, have been chief executive officer for 18 years. That's a long time. I do think people get stale. I mean, I think that's human nature. I think it's time for the town to experience new leadership. I'm really excited to see what happens next. I mean, you know, I guess what I'd hope people remember, that we did some great things, and it's a team. Everything is a team. No, if anybody thinks something was done and one person was behind it, I guarantee that's not true. There's a bunch of people that have to pull together. Some people get recognized, some people don't, but there's always more than one person that's doing it. And we've done some great things, right? We've moved the community forward. You know, it's fun to be part of a great team. You know, the future's bright for Matthews. I mean, we're living the American dream, really, and it's been fun to be a part of it.
Well, that was fantastic. Let's give Hazen a round of applause. You know, in the video, Hazen talked about growing up in the 80s and 90s, and you know, people don't use words like satchel that grew up in the 80s and 90s. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and back in the 60s, the anti-war activists had a saying. They said, "What if you had a war and nobody showed up?" Remember that? Well, I was kind of thinking the same thing. You know, we had a reception last Thursday. What if they had a reception for you and nobody showed up? That, you know. But this room was packed out for 3 hours with lots of former employees, Hazen's family. You know, I met all of his kids as adults, 2 daughters and 2 sons. It looks like, you know, cast from a movie set. These beautiful people, you know, his kids are all, you know, look like models or something. They obviously take after Leanne a bit. But a lot of people showed up, and I think that's because they love you, Hazen. They do, and it's a good thing. I kind of use that opportunity to roast Hazen a bit. I had some I made up some comments supposedly from some staff people, things like someone said, what he lacks in intelligence, he makes up for in effort. And I said that another person said, I truly love how he doesn't care what people think. That takes a confident person. And several others, and I got a few laughs. And one of them I did on the spur of the moment, probably a little foolishly, not thinking it all the way through, but I said, why don't you let me hire some more officers, you idiot? And I was, kind of talking about Mr. Pennington there, Chief Pennington. And afterwards, Chief said, yeah, I think that was funny, but I would never call Hazen an idiot because I respect him too much. And I think that's very telling. And when I was going around the room, and I shared this with you and you didn't believe me, but it's true. I was trying to get somebody other than the former mayors to come up and say something nice about you or say some kind of remembrance, and nobody would. And they weren't saying anything because they were overtaken with emotion, and a lot of people were crying. I think Becky was choking back some tears, and others. I saw some people, biting their lips, and they didn't feel comfortable standing up because it was a very, very emotional. And to Chief Pennington's comment, I think it really goes to respect, and you have to earn respect, and you certainly have earned respect of this town and everybody that lives here. So tonight, I'm not going to speak for a very long time, but I do want to share some of the milestones that have happened under what I consider really the contemporary era that I know of the governance of Matthews, and that starts with Mayor Myers and Mayor Taylor, Mayor Bailey, and myself. Some of the things that have happened, and you worked with all four of us, and all four of us are amazingly different people with different leadership styles, and somehow you managed to live through it all. So I was the one that ran him off, though. You guys, I was the one that made him say, I'm tapping out. I can't take anymore. But here's some of the things, if we consider, that have happened in Matthews since Hazen has been our town manager. We built the nationally recognized Mecklenburg County Sportsplex here, and it really is nationally recognized. I was in Los Angeles on a business trip and saw the Matthews Sportsplex mentioned on television. The expansion of South Trade Street. We acquired the Purser Halsey property, and I know that was no easy task. To get over 100 acres of open space that has since turned into walking and biking trails, a community garden, a dog park with lots of new amenities coming, hopefully, that Corey talked about tonight, including that amphitheater that we're looking forward to. Hazen oversaw the transitioning from an all-volunteer fire department with 20 volunteers to a combination department with 31 full-time staff and an ISO rating of 2, putting it in the top 3% of departments across North Carolina. We saw the development of the north end area of downtown, and I know former Commissioner Miller always likes to show before and after photographs of what that looked like. We built the Crestdale Heritage Trail, which is a great new amenity to the town. And the town successfully lobbied the state legislature to significantly increase the town's share of tourism dollars, or tax revenue, from, I believe, 50% to 75%. We purchased the DeVore property to make yet another park here in town. And as I said during my quasi roast of Hazen the other day, for me, I think, sir, your greatest contribution to this community is the culture of service excellence that you have established. You've hired outstanding employees that do an outstanding job every day, and they go above the pale daily, and it makes it really easy to be an elected official in this town. I talked to some of my colleagues that are in other towns, and they're getting their lives threatened daily and stuff. We don't have that here. People are calling me, thanking me for the things that our outstanding staff does every day. And I think you helped build that culture, and I think it's going to stay. We're going to make sure it stays. And we greatly appreciate you for that. And I'd like to take this opportunity to give the rest of the board to perhaps say a few words, and we'll start with you, Commissioner Garner.
I guess I should have been prepared for this, but I'm not. Hazen, one of the first times I met you, the first time I remember meeting you, I came to your office because of the East John Street widening project. And to say that in 2016, I was a different person is probably an understatement. I remember coming to your office and you just listened to me as I worked through some frustrations. And as you know, and this is going to, I don't want to center myself, but I want to say that, I'm not a trusting person, and I'm certainly not an openly emotional person, but I remember sitting in your office and crying out of frustration. And then I'm sure that you had a moment when you realized that I was running for office. And I can only imagine what went through your head. But the past 2 years and several months, I have watched you work and I have learned so much from you. I have seen possibly the best listener that I've ever met. You take our words and you can somehow turn them into a sentence that you keep in your notebook. And that's only one of the amazing skills that you have. And I appreciate you sharing your skills with us and forming a better board through that. You have been a tremendous gift. We're going to miss you.
Commissioner Whitley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and commissioners. And Hazen, I talked to you before I left town and expressed the appreciation that I have for you. A lot of you don't know, a lot of little things mean so much. And for the last six years, Hazen and I have been pledging allegiance to one another, to the United States of America, by standing on the dais side by side. And it's a personal thing that we've had, and I'm going to miss that, Hazen. And I take the Pledge of Allegiance in the last 6 years that you and I pledged together for liberty and justice for all. I'm going to miss you, and I wish you the very best in your endeavors going forward. I know this is not the end. I know we'll be seeing you around, and I wish you, Leanne, and the family the very best. God bless you. I want to thank you on behalf of Mount Moriah for showing up for all of our Martin Luther King services to walk with us and to be a part of that. That means so much when the town adopted that. And you not only adopted the town, but you took an active part in that. And I won't ever forget that. Best of wishes. I love you very much.
Please state your name and location.
Larry Whitley, 82 degrees from sunny Honolulu, Hawaii.
Wow. Thank you, Larry.
I love you too, Larry.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I've said this a lot the last few weeks, but I always make the comment that Hazen started as town manager of Matthews before I started kindergarten. So he's been here for a little while, and I've served on the board for the last 2 years, and you have been just a wealth of knowledge. Any question or comment I've had, you've answered it quickly. You've taken phone calls from me at late at night, early in the morning, and you always have a zealousness about it. I mean, I could call you at 10 o'clock at night. I know you go to bed early, so and you'd answer the phone and answer my question and do the best you could to steer us in the right direction. An admirable quality that I learned early on is you and I had a disagreement or something, and you were so humble to call and apologize, and we made up, and it was good. But you have such a way to admit fault, and you were so gracious in that, and that's a great quality in a leader. We're gonna miss you. I'm sure that you'll still get the phone calls from Becky and Higdon and the rest of us even after you leave. So don't go too far on the beach, but enjoy your retirement. Thank you for everything you've done to the town.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Mr. Tufano.
Thank you. Everything everybody said is absolutely true, but something touched me more than any of those things. And I was walking down the street unknowingly to you, behind you, and you were stopping, picking up trash and straightening signs. And to me, that was the indication of a man who truly loves this town. And I want to thank you for that, and very best wishes to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, we've had just a short 3 months together, and it's been a pleasure and an honor getting to know you. We've had our phone conversations, and I thank you for clarifying things with me, and enjoyed really what little bit of time we've had to work together. Enjoyed that, and I wish you the best, and thank you for everything.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoover. Commissioner Urban.
We'll try not to get too emotional here. Hazen, you have left or will be leaving the town of Matthews far better than before you came. I mean, that says kudos in 18, 19 years. The other part is, it touches me a lot, is you didn't profess to know everything. So I would occasionally get that phone call from what I call was town hall annex. And it'd be like, John, I've got a question. What would you do in this circumstance? And that above all was special to me, for someone to reach out. When I'd gotten a lot of grief in 18 years, but you sort of all that, and at times would call and say, hey, what about this? What about that? How would you approach it? And I always told you, use me and abuse me as much as you can, because as long as I sit on this dais, I will serve this town. And I really just, that's one of those things that just sort of stood out in my mind. I wish you all the well. I'm not the best shagger in the world, but we can teach and learn. And we're going to have a little beach club there with a group of us, Cress and Paul and myself and you and whatever. And I think Charlie visits occasionally. So I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. Thanks, Joe.
Mr. Buckley, would you care to say anything?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, 19 years together. We were hand in hand the whole time, and you have commanded my utmost respect. And I can honestly tell everybody here that no one cares more about Matthews, the town of Matthews, than the town manager, Hazen Blodgett. He has served with grace and distinction, and I just wish you well, and you will be missed strongly. Thank you for those 19 years together.
Thank you, Charlie.
While everybody's talking, I thought of a couple more things I want to say real briefly. Can't make sure I get everything in. The first is one of the buzzwords of the last decade or so, or buzz phrase, I guess, is servant leadership. And I'm sure most people have heard of that, but I think you really embody that. And I was reminded by that by Commissioner Tofano's comments. I too have witnessed Hazen walking around town and picking garbage up. How many town managers do that? That's pretty amazing. And the second thing I want to thank you for is I think everybody in this town knows I lead an exceptionally busy life. I'm usually double and triple booked for meetings every day. And I've really enjoyed the ability to call Hazen, and he would say, let me just take that monkey off your back. And he would just handle something that I wouldn't have to worry about. And I can't tell you how much, stress that relieved for me on numerous occasions that you've done that. And I thank you for that. So I think we can all feel the love. We probably should do like a group hug or something now. But before we do that, I understand there's some people in the audience that would like to say a few words about Hazen. So if you'd just like to, not staff, but if there's folks that aren't staff that would like to say something, if you could line up at the podium, perhaps we could start with our former mayors, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Myers. Ralph, go ahead, sir.
Wow, it's been a long time since I've stood here. And other than Charlie Buckley, John Urban a little bit, Charlie Buckley, everybody's different. It's really is different, except Hazen. Hazen's been here a long time. I think we're part of a small group, Hazen, Becky and I, who've been managers in cities and towns. I was in 3 different cities as a manager and then came to Matthews. And we understand the role we're in as being servants of the board, subject to the whim of the board. And when Hazen came, he actually called me before, we talked a little bit, but it was an awkward situation. The mayor had made a decision, the board, that they wanted a change of leadership, and we were willing to accept that because we knew as managers that's the way it was. But Hazen coming here with the past manager still here could have been very, very awkward, but it wasn't. It was not very awkward at all because I liked working with Hazen. Hazen was very understanding. He usually left me alone, which was really the best part. I could pretty much do anything and we would be all right. But
just be within your budget, right?
Including
just be within the budget.
Yeah. But, and I just wanted to point that out, that it was a very awkward situation and we made a great pass. He only pissed me off one time. And
Tell us,
If
tell
you want
us.
to know what it is,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to tell that. Has something to do with some past council members. But I just wanted to say that Hazen has been great for this town, and it was great working with him. And that's really all I have to say. I didn't want to take too much time from the Lee and Jim show. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Hazen.
Thank you, Ralph. I loved our relationship too. Still do.
Thank you, Mr. Massera. Mr.
Well,
Taylor.
I was going to let my elder speak first, since I spoke at the Thursday night event first, but he told me no, so I obey my elders. So I'll go first. First of all, let me get out of the way and say one thing about Ralph, because Ralph did make a comment. Many people in this room may not know that Ralph was the town manager before Hazen, and Ralph did an exceptional job. And it was very awkward for a lot of people when Hazen came in, and we had a lot of very senior, very smart, very good department heads. And we all know that in the corporate world, a new CEO comes in, you usually clean house. When I was on council at that time, we were very concerned that the new manager was not going to clean house because we were very confident in who we had. And Ralph, being at that time, the head of public works, we not only had a great public works director, we had a backup town manager. So Ralph, I want to thank you while I'm here. You were great. Thank you. I know you retired a number of years ago, but thank you for everything you've done for the town of Matthews. And now we jump over to Hazen. I talked on Thursday about how we went and flew down to Whiteville to get this young pup. And one thing, I'm looking at Hazen as he's smiling, and I want to make a comment about the video, which was tremendous. But one thing that stood out at me, Hazen, and you're not the only one that this is obvious to, but I don't remember you being that gray when you came here. We've all aged, and you've aged gracefully. You've done a tremendous job. One thing that I did not say on Thursday that I think is very, very important for me to say, and this goes to for a lot of the people that are in the room. A manager's job is very, very difficult. Many of us have worked in the corporate world or in a small business, and it's hard dealing with one manager and keeping one manager happy. A town manager in our system here has to keep 4 people happy at all times, or they're potentially gone. 4 of you can say, we don't like Hazen, and he's out the door. But Hazen was very smart. Hazen had a very good dialogue with everybody on the boards that I saw. He had great dialogues with the mayors. I saw him interact with Lee. I saw him keep Lee under control. And I learned a lot in watching Lee when Lee was mayor. And Hazen and I talked, if we didn't talk 4 days out of the week, out of a 5-day business week, I mean, it was unusual. We talked many, many times. And Hazen, I had the confidence in you from being on the board before I became mayor. I had the confidence in knowing you and understanding you, and I think you had the same with me. And we had a very good working relationship. One unique thing about Matthews, and I know everybody in this room understands this, but it's important to say, Hazen, I'm going to go back to your memory banks. Remember when we went to the school for newly elected mayors? Mm-hmm. We were sitting in a room, and you meet all sorts of people from these small little towns all around North Carolina, and they get to start talking to you. And I don't know if it's just because we look kind of interesting or we look like we're interested in them, but they were telling us all sorts of stuff. Why they ran for office, why they didn't like the previous person in office, whether it was a mayor or a council member. And Hazen, you remember this? It was stories like, well, the police chief is sleeping with the fire chief, and the public works person is embezzling money from here. Every story was a problem. Every story was a problem in that town that person thought they were going to solve and fix. And we looked at each other and we said, wow, we've got it good. Yeah. We don't have these types of garbage problems. Matthews is a great place. Matthews is still a great place, and it's because of everybody that's been involved. I'm very encouraged by the dialogue I heard this evening from everybody. Good job. I'm very, very impressed. And while I'm thinking about it, whoever got the new chairs, kudos. Long overdue. Long overdue. And Lee and I'll take blame for those uncomfortable chairs that were there for so many years, but very nice. Hazen, the one thing I want to talk about staff is that I had 8 reviews where I was one responsible for submitting your review based on the conversation with the town board. And one thing you did time in and time out was you stood up for staff, not only the department heads, but every single person that reported through this organization, from the last person hired to the assistant town manager, the police chief, or the fire chief. You had their back every single minute, and I commend you for that. We had debates and we had discussions and we had, I'll say, slight arguments, but you know what? We hashed it all out and moved on. And I think that's the way it has to be. And Hazen, I'm very, very proud of you. I'm very, very proud of this town, as I know so many other people are. I was here the day we hired you many, many years ago, and I felt an obligation to be here today on for your last meeting. So Hazen, with all my heart, everything I can do, thank you very much for your friendship. Thank you for your loyalty. Thank you for your commitment to this town. And you said in your video, it was, is, and always will be a team effort. That's what makes Matthews special. And for that, I thank you. Leanne, take care of him. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll sit down, and then you can start your timers for a 5-hour speech from the next guy. I came like this evening for a reason. I didn't wear a suit. I didn't wear a tie. I wore a shirt and a sweater that my wife says doesn't match. And the reason is it doesn't matter. Hazen, you can enjoy the rest of your days. You can put the tie away, wear a comfortable pair of jeans, a comfortable pair of shoes, and enjoy life. And I wish you all the best. I hope you don't disappear. I hope to see you, not in your onesie, as we talked about on Thursday, but I hope to see you around. I want to play pickleball and ride mountain bikes with you. So again, congratulations, Hazen. Best of luck. Leanne, thank you for sharing Hazen with us and the community. And thank you for solidifying the deal over at Raucci's many, many years ago, because if it wasn't for Leanne, Hazen may not be here. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Appreciate it.
Now, introduce my elders.
Lori, could you put the timer up, please?
Well, I don't really have much to say. And I really don't know what to say, because I'm filled with, as I was Thursday night, with a lot of different feelings about things. And I'm speaking more from my heart than my head about Hazen. And so it's a little difficult for me, really. But I do want to start with something I mentioned Thursday evening. And many people were not here that night, but some were, and I'll bore you again. But we worked with Hazen. We did fly down to Whiteville because I wanted to go and Jim wanted to go and see Hazen in his environment. We wanted to see him in his town. We wanted to know, did he have a connection with this town? Why is he coming to Matthews? What's going on? Is he running away from some problem or some controversy, or what's going on? And we concluded that he was coming to Matthews because he thought it was a better place. Not a better place necessarily for Hazen, but as he told me toward the end of our discussions with him, he said, the real reason I want to come to Matthews is I have researched Matthews. And I know a lot about the town of Matthews, and I've talked to a lot of people who have told me about Matthews. And I want to come to Matthews for my family. I have 4 children, and I want them to have the very best opportunities in life. And I believe Matthews is going to provide that opportunity. So Hazen's reason for coming to Matthews was what makes Matthews a great place to live, work, and do what? Raise your family. So that was the reason that Hazen Blodgett came. We could have offered him no money and he still would have come. What a deal. We didn't do a very good deal. But Hazen came for that reason. And during his time, and you know, when Hazen came, he and I spent the first 6 years together here, and he did come into a somewhat awkward situation. And Ralph, you and I were part of that awkward situation. But you know what today? Hazen Blodgett and Ralph Macera are two of my best friends. And we get along and we work through that awkward situation. Because as Hazen was walking out the door of Town Hall in the video, what was the word he used? Team. It's a team effort. And I'm proud to say that that's what we have done in Matthews, and what we need to continue to do in Matthews is to take the Hazen Blodgett model, which is to stay calm. I've never seen Hazen get upset about anything. I can't think, well, okay, maybe you did. We'll get Leanne up here in a minute, but I've never, and we talk about the accomplishments, and I'm not going to go through the accomplishments, but John, you mentioned the Sportsplex. Hazen will tell you that he and I had to go down to Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and we had to get on our knees and beg them to keep that funding in for the Sportsplex time and time again. And we would talk to the manager and the Parks and Rec people, and we would say, Matthews needs a Sportsplex. Matthews needs it. The people need it. Today, we're the beneficiaries of that. Projects that we do don't just happen during your 2-year term. They happen over the long span. And Hazen has maintained that stability and that continuity, and I believe Becky will do the same thing. But that's what's important. It's not the accomplishments. It's the fact that we work together as a team, and we didn't let disagreements divide us. As I stand here tonight, I cannot think of a single disagreement or argument or falling out that Hazen and I had. Now, he may say, oh, you forgot about such and such. Well, yeah, I forgot about it because I wanted to move forward. I mean, I'd get up every morning and leave this guy 5 voicemails on his phone here at Town Hall until he figured out how to cut the timer down to 20 seconds on his voicemail. That's how he got rid of me. I just increased the number to 10 calls every morning. But we worked on these projects together, and Hazen, all during this time, was even keeled. And I think that, and he's, as all town staff, has always been someone I could trust and I could count on. And I also trusted and counted on my fellow board members for the 22 years that I spent sitting at this dais or the old dais that we had. And I think that's important, and that we need to do that, and we need to row forward. Hazen has provided that great leadership. I think Becky will do the same thing. So I'm proud to say tonight, thank you, Hazen, for all that you've done. Thank you for being a great leader, and thank you for being my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone else in the audience that would care to make a comment? Anyone on Zoom? All right, we have some staff presentations. We'll start with Corey.
All right, Hazen. So I have had the pleasure of serving with you for each of those 19 years.
That's true.
And of course, the last 9, you've been a little more of a mentor to me as a department head. Thank you for taking the chance on me too, by the way. And well, even if you didn't know that, but I really would be at my desk making decisions like, man, what would Hazen do? Or even the morning before, like, what would Hazen wear to this meeting? I do love some of those shirts. I got to find out where you get them too. And then we have our one-on-one meetings on Thursdays, and I'll always pick up little nuggets from Hazen, little pieces of knowledge, first world problems. So oftentimes we're talking, and it's like, you know what? First world problem. Help me learn to keep things in perspective. Yeah. Well, another one is Corey. You know what? Your call. you know, I trust your judgment. And that they really did give me a little confidence, especially early on. And it was good. But like everyone has said, you know, your management style really has been the respect and admiration that we have for you, because we all knew we were all headed toward this same goal. Your diligence, persistence, working with our local partners, wanting to keep these businesses engaged, certainly looking at these greenways and trail projects, the Matthews Downtown Loop, one example of something that's on the radar right now. So staying on Novant, Combraco, if they're listening, Harris Teeter, really staying in their back pocket. It's like, this is important to Matthews and we're going to make this happen.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, at the appropriate time, as long as you don't keep that promise you made on Thursday about.
I'm keeping it, baby.
So I'm going to present this to you. This is from town staff. So that portion of the Matthews Downtown Loop that we just were talking about, extending from Novant down to Crestdale Road, and then connecting with the Matthews, the Crestdale Heritage Trail. Again, at the appropriate time, should be called Hazen's Hook.
All right, man.
Because your hard work working on that project.
That's pretty neat. I want to say something real quickly about maybe a character trait that Corey picked up from Hazen. I was at a hearing, I believe, Jim, it was in your neighborhood. And there was a gentleman that sounded like the 80s comic Sam Kinison, you know, was screaming, you know, 1 foot from Corey's face, you know, like the place was going to burn down. And Corey says, no, just be calm. Everything will be okay. I couldn't believe that. So you got that from Hazen, huh? I mean, like, wow. You had incredible calmness that night. Let's put it that way. Next up is Chief Pennington.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners, thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to come here tonight. Hazen, I just want to publicly thank you for your leadership, your unwavering support of our police department. I've been here 4 years, and I can say that having watched you work and having you watched you, as somebody had said earlier, have the backs of every one of your employees is an understatement. You have never used the word I or me. You've always used the word team, us, or we. So for that, I think is a true testament to your leadership. The mayor mentioned it, talking about servant leadership. It was developed by Robert Greenleaf, and the 3 things that he talks about as a servant leader you display. It's sharing your power, and by giving the trust to your department heads, by giving the trust to your employees, you demonstrated that every day. You put the needs of your employees first. Again, during budget times, that's always evident. The amount of passion that you bring forward to support the employees is there, and you help us develop to perform at our highest level possible. I think me sitting here today is a testament to that. You took a risk on me, right? And I want to personally thank you for that also. That you took a risk on me from a guy from the north that really had no real connection to Matthews. And I don't know what you saw in me, but I appreciate you seeing it. And I'll be honest with you, every day I work to make sure I don't let you down. So I appreciate you. And we want to show you our sense of appreciation by presenting you, if you would. I hope I don't drop it. A little token of our appreciation from the Matthews Police Department. Let me read it to you, actually. If I had my glasses, I'd probably read it better. It says, thank you for your unwavering support of the men and women of the Matthews Police Department throughout your career as town manager, June 23, 2003 to March 31st, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Rob Kittenberg, Fire Chief, up next.
Backup dancer staying back. This will be a little more levity than Clark, but inside joke for all of you. It's only one piece of paper and it's not PowerPoint.
either. So, yes, I know. Okay. So at the top, it says be brief. So a lot of things that have been said tonight are written on this piece of paper. So all I'm going to do is echo other people's sentiments. Hazen has built a winning team. He's appointed every department head in the town. So we are truly his team. And everybody knows a team achieves more when they have a leader they trust and they want to follow. And those followers begin to emulate the qualities of that leader. I've had a great time here in 5 years. Thank you for taking a risk on Clark. That made it even better. That was a little joke at his expense. But things that Hazen does exceptionally well that resonate with me and the other department heads. The first is our safe space discussions. When we meet every Tuesday morning and talk about you and rehash where we need to go. But we're free to speak our minds. And when we leave, we're all good. Performance reviews. I've been doing this for 42 years, and 36 of those, it was like writing my own what I did over summer break. And I came in my first year and Hazen handed me my performance appraisal, and I think it was 12 pages. And he had written down everything that we had talked about and everything that we had accomplished. So, to me, that meant a tremendous amount. Follow-up. Hazen is extremely diligent when it comes to keeping notes, as we've all joked about, and following up on what he's asked you to do or what you've said you would do. We all love Hazen's rule where silence means consent. So if you don't speak up in the safe space, you know what's going to happen. And what I personally will miss the most is our bi-weekly meetings. Corey, I don't know what you're doing to have to meet every week, but anyway. And as I explained to Leanne a little bit earlier tonight, our 1 hour meetings is about 30 minutes of family and life. We're about at the same place, same potholes, same pitfalls. And how Hazen interacts with his family emulate how he approaches his work and the people that work for him. So we were meeting a couple of weeks ago and Hazen said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do on Friday. I need to have a plan. Does he have a plan? He's got a plan. He's got a notebook for a plan, I understand. But Friday is April Fool's Day. So don't be surprised if he's back here. There is television, which we talked about, but there's always an opportunity to dust and vacuum. So Leanne supports those. So that brings me to the end of the brown box, which is not as nice as the police department box. And Angela Lee, whatever Angela's new last name is, you guys got to realize Hazen has helped pick department heads in bigger cities than Matthews. So, everybody's known by the hat they wear, and Hazen wears a lot of hats here in Matthews. And I looked in an encyclopedia, and I couldn't find what a manager's hat looks like. But in the fire service, as well as the police department, we have traditions. And every firefighter who leaves or retires with their helmet, because that is our hat. So I would like to present to you on behalf of the members of the Matthews Fire Department a little dusting token. You can put it on the wall or a bookcase or somewhere, and you can dust it every Friday when Leanne's gone. We'd like to present this to Hazen Blodgett for his trust in me and his commitment to the Matthews Fire and EMS Department.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Wow. So you've got my name on there.
And
I don't think my neck's strong enough.
Appropriately, it's a retired from service helmet. Wow. Looks beautiful.
Before we move on, I want to know a little bit more about these safe space meetings.
Need to get ring. That's all I'm telling you.
Thank you for some very, very thoughtful gifts from staff and thoughts. We appreciate you sharing that. Hazen, would you like to say a few words, sir?
Yeah, look, I do want to make it quick. I'm very excited. You know, I think Mayor Taylor hit on it. Mayor Myers hit on it too. This board has vision, right? You guys, just like what we talked about today, you guys are going to help move this town forward. Becky's going to help with you guys to bring this vision forward. We've talked about the next big thing. I mean, really, the future for Matthews is very bright. And, you know, the staff, the department heads really are a very impressive group of people, high character folks. And, you know, it's good to be a part of that. Shit. So I thought I was going to hold it together, but so I guess I would say it's going to be fun to watch. I have learned, and I actually called the ICMA. Ralph, Becky and I are part of the International City and County Managers Association, and retired managers, if people call retired managers, they're supposed to say, that's a great question. There's a manager in the manager's seat down at town hall, and there's elected officials, and you can call them, because that's my job. Ralph and I know how important, just like Ralph, we work well together. We've worked well together in retirement because we understand kind of this big picture of democracy, which is the council manager form. It's a very unique form of that, and it's worked for 100 years. And I think people like us want to make sure it works for another 100 years. So God bless you guys, and thank you for all you've done for me and my family.
I forgot to say I love you, Luann. That's the most important thing.
So I think beyond a great working relationship, everyone here considers you a friend as well, Hazen. So you and I talked about that a little bit. Hope to see you around town and maybe helping me with bees. And I don't know if I'll ever get in a onesie. Nobody wants to see that, but maybe I'll go bike riding with you sometime. So good to see you around town. We're going to wrap this up really quickly. We have a couple more agenda items. First is the mayor's report. I want to read first of all a letter I received a couple days ago from the Arbor Day Foundation. It says, on behalf of the Arbor Day Foundation, I congratulate Matthews on earning recognition as a 2021 Tree City USA. We are thrilled that Matthews takes pride in creating a community that places unique value on the planting and caring of trees. And it goes on, but we have had this award for many, many years, and I'm glad that we're continuing in that tradition. The other thing I want to mention is this past Sunday at the Levine Center, there was a celebration of life for Miss Iris DeVore. And I unfortunately was unable to attend. I had another commitment, but I understand a lot of folks did. While I attended church at my church, Matthews United Methodist, Sunday morning, Pastor Chuck Wilson referred to Iris as the matriarch of Matthews. And I know she was a fantastic citizen and did a lot for all of us here. And it is the intention of this board to honor Miss DeVore and the DeVore family by someday naming the piece of property that we bought where she last lived, that we're going to develop as a park in her honor, or the family's honor. So I wanted to share that. And that's all I have tonight. We'll go on to the attorney's report.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to read the encyclopedia tonight, so everybody get ready. No report, Mayor.
That sounds good. The last time I will say this to the man to my left, we have a Hazen Blodgett Town Manager report.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll go on to agenda item number 13, closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A5 to consider acquisition of real property. I'd like to call for a motion.
Mayor, you need to add to that the street address of the property.
Yes. I'll call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A5 to discuss acquisition of real property located at 137 South Fremont Street. to include the mayor, board of commissioners, town attorney Buckley, town manager Blodgett, assistant town manager Becky Hawk, and town clerk Lori Canapino.
Could you have, Corey came to that too?
And I'd like to also include Corey, because you have to